In the year 550 of the Madoc kingdom, Ramsay and his father were talking. Pointing at the map, the father said this territory would be his from then on. Hans Rugel, the father, was a minor baron with a small plot of land in the north of the Madoc kingdom. The land he showed Ramsay was the kingdom's northernmost holding. Land a desolate expanse with no inhabitants. Baal, Ramsay's eldest brother, ruled the Rugel domain. Kun, the older brother, served only as an assistant and backup for emergencies. Ramsay, the third son, was largely ignored. Put simply, he was just an inconvenient mouth to feed. When Ramsay heard they would receive the land, he smiled, said it made him a branch of the Rugel family, and Hans agreed. Ramsay said he should change his last name to separate himself from the main family, and from then on would go by Ramsay Bartlett. Hans heard this and asked whether that was really all right. Ramsay wondered whether it was too ironic to act like a peer and still be useless. He said it wasn't great, but he understood and asked if he could at least get some startup funds, so his mother handed him the bag of money and said she had prepared 1,000 rubles. Ramsay worked out that one loaf of bread cost 1 rubella and, as the third son, decided to take any benefit he could get. His mother said she was sorry and asked Hans if that was all he wanted to talk about. Opening his hands, he said he was sorry as a father that he could do so little for him. Ramsay smiled and reassured him that he would leave in a week. Leaving the house, he said he was off to the village. Outside, he told himself he understood it had to be this way. As a reincarnator, his mind was far older than 13. Shitaro Ikaruga had been an ordinary Japanese man working for an exploitative company in the northern lands. One day he died in the most cliched way, hit by a truck, and realized he had been reincarnated as Ramsay. Without ties to the nobility, as the third son he was almost certain not to inherit the family. Rather than become a retainer for another noble by marriage, he chose to go to the land he had been given. Determined, he set out to farm the undeveloped land he had been granted and to build his own village. At that moment, his friend Danny came over to say hello. Danny was the fourth son of the village's only inn, and like Ramsay, he had an older brother and could not inherit, so they got along well. Ramsay greeted him and asked him to pick something up for him. He said he needed rye, beans, turnip seeds, an axe, a saw, cloth, and salt, and Danny stalked him and asked why he would need all that and whether he was planning a journey. Ramsay said it was not like that. He was just told to leave and given some land, so he would live there. Danny was taken aback when Ramsay asked if he was okay. He shouted at him that he should have told him sooner. Ramsay said he had just found out about it that day. Danny asked several questions about where the territory was located and how big it was. Ramsay answered all he knew, and when Danny asked if he had any plans, Ramsay said he had not thought much about it and asked whether Danny was upset that they had given birth. They were discarded when no longer needed. Danny was taken aback by this, and Ramsay knew that, like Danny, there were countless useless people in the world, so he offered his hand and said they would make those guys eat their words. Danny smiled and tapped him lightly. They said they would give it a try. Ramsay was glad to have an ally. Danny asked what he should do, and Ramsay asked how many people in the village were in a similar situation, and the man replied that there might be about 10 of them, both men and women. He told him to talk to these people and tell them they would build a new village together. Danny agreed and said he would handle it. They said goodbye and Ramsay said he'd now take care of his part as well. Back at home, Ramsay and Hans went through books and papers. After seeing all the information about the land, Hans gave him more books. Tell him he should use this information as well. Ramsay knew it was crucial to gather information about the land ahead of time, especially the weather, because without a rain temperature chart, they could only infer conditions from records of nearby villages. He knew that in most years snow began piling up around mid-December, became permanent, started melting at the end of February, and was gone by April. He wondered if it matched Hackaday. Hans asked whether the information helped, and Ramsay said it did and asked if he could show him the map. Hans did so. Both of them looked at and discussed the boundaries of their territories. Pointing to the small river, he asked whether they could use it as a boundary. Hans said that was fine. Ramsay then asked who held territories bordering the land to the east, west, and north. Hans said the west belonged to Baron Boden. The Beverly Mountains marked the territory's border. East of that lay the kingdom's direct territory, with the Ted River as the boundary. North of there was Baron Hendrik, who oversaw the area, and a wall ran along the boundary. Ramsay wondered if he would have enough timber and drinking water. He told Hans he was worried about the soil but would have to keep cultivating it patiently. Grateful, he thanked Hans for the help and said he would return to his room. After leaving the office, we will continue to do so. thank you very much for joining us today. Ramsay entered his barren, empty room. Sitting on the cot, he decided it was time to leave this storage room and figured he only needed to take his clothes, a coat, a knife, and a blanket, with 500 rubles hidden in his pocket. Looking up, he saw a spider web. It didn't feel like a good place, though it was nice to eat without working. Compared with his life as a corporate slave at a black company, this felt like night and day. He stretched. Danny knew he had to gather the people and get the deed to the land from his father, and there was still a lot to do. Just then his door swung open and his brothers came in. They mocked him, saying Ramsay was finally being disowned for leaving, and taunted him about it. Ramsay clarified that he would live there because he owned land. His brother laughed and said he could never live on that lousy piece of land and called him naive. They saw Ramsay still smiling and got annoyed. The older brother Ball spat on him, saying he was frustrated and wishing he would hurry up and die in that new territory. They both left his room, and Ramsay cleaned himself. In the old world, he said, people used to say it is better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of an ox. From the window he saw a night sky filled with stars, his hand lifted as if to touch them. Aware he had been given a second life, he wanted to take that chance. He would be the head of a chicken rather than the tail of an ox, and with those hands he would carve out the new world. The next morning Ramsay reached his land, ready to begin establishing his territory. Checking the map, he studied the markings of his territory. Touching the ground, he found it hard and brittle and realized tilling would be difficult. In the mountains, he found birch trees everywhere. He knew he would have no trouble with wood. Touching the soil there, he found it soft and fluffy and noticed the mountain soil was better than the plains. Realizing it was best to set the base at the foot of the mountain, he knew getting up early had paid off and considered heading back to the village. Morning gave way to afternoon. Ramsay entered the village, hungry because he had not eaten all morning. Then a boy called out to him. Roger was the lumberjack's youngest son. Roger ran up to him, relieved to have found him. Ramsay asked why he was in such a hurry. He said Danny had been looking for him. Someone excitedly told Ramsay that Danny had said he was leading the village. Ramsay said he wasn't leading it, but was being pushed out. Roger begged him to take him in because his older brother bullied him for being fat and slow. Ramsay noticed it was the same in every household. Ramsay was glad to see more companions, but could not afford to feed extra mouths. Roger said his family had logged for generations, but his older brothers had all the logging rights. Remembering his plan to set up a base at the foot of the mountain, he asked Roger to chop down the trees, and Roger agreed, saying to leave the wood to him. They shook hands, Ramsay welcomed him, and Roger said he was looking forward to it. A short time later, they both arrived at the house, where Danny and the other people those gathered were waiting. Danny told Ramsay he was late. Then he asked where he'd been. He said he'd been scouting the territory. Danny then introduced the people he'd gathered. Willie is the farmer's fifth son, and Eric is the carpenter's second son. Danny said the two wanted to help Ramsay pursue his ambitions. Ramsay thanked them both and asked what had made them decide to join them. Willie said he had no land left from his parents, so it did not matter where he cultivated. Eric said he had no special reason and was leaving because he did not get along with his brother. Surprised by another sibling argument, Ramsay accepted that this was how things were. The village was poor and full of necessity-driven discontent. Poverty dulled hearts and minds, and people lost compassion. Ramsay wanted to create a village that would not end up like that. Eric told Ramsay they weren't like him and hadn't messed up. They could always go back. Ramsay was surprised but knew he was right. They had not been kicked out, and if something felt wrong, they could pack their bags and return to the village anytime. So it still stung him, but he knew there was no use dwelling on it. He raised his hand and said they'd build a new village with the 5 of them. Everyone raised their hands in agreement. Ramsay said he would announce their future plans. Danny and Eric teased him. They called him chief and esteemed lord, and Ramsay said they first needed a base house and to start cultivating the fields, with Roger and Eric handling the house and Willie and Danny tending the fields. When Eric asked about the wood, he was told birch-like trees grew on the mountain. He said if they built a house, it would be nice to have some mock around. Ramsay said they would have to search the mountain for it and asked Willie which crop he grew best. Willie said that at home he used robins, wheat, and garlic, and the other man asked if he could sneak some seeds away, and Willie said it would be fine as long as it was not too much. They would begin by building a small birch house and planting easy-to-grow rye and beans. For water, they would first look for a mountain spring, and if they found none, fetch water from the river. Ramsay apologized for rushing and said they could start tomorrow. The others didn't mind, and Eric said he needed a little time to prepare and told them to cut down a few trees. Danny left just as the traveling merchant arrived. Everyone came out and Ramsay introduced himself, saying he would govern the northern side of the territory. The merchant Slay introduced himself and thanked Ramsay for his kindness. Slay noted Ramsay was quite young, and Ramsay said he would be 13 that year. He said Danny had told him about his needs and showed the cart where his goods were stored. He asked what they needed. Ramsay thought and said he needed a year's supply of salt and some nails, and Eric wanted 100 of them. After they finished going over the items, the merchant said the total was about 1,200 rubles. Ramsay was surprised because the amount was higher than he expected. Needing to buy food and save money for emergencies, he asked Slay to break down the costs for him. Slay told Ramsay a year's worth of salt cost 500 rubles, nails were 3 rubles each totaling 300 rubles, and the cloth was 400 rubles, and Ramsay wasn't sure those prices were fair since he'd never made such purchases in this world and had been a noble's child. Danny stepped in, saying the price was a bit high so he'd pass on the cloth, and offered 700 rubles for the salt and nails. Slay said it did not leave him much profit, but he noticed the young kids were very eager. If he made a good impression now, they might become regular customers, he thought, so he agreed to the deal, saying it was fine, and Ramsay thanked him, clearly pleased. Slay asked where they planned to build, and the man said they'd head north to the mountain's eastern foothills. Slay then said he'd check back with them later and left. Everyone sighed with relief, and Ramsay told him to disperse so they could pack their things and meet in the square before dawn. After everyone left, Ramsay stopped Willie and asked if he had a minute. Later, they arrived at Willie's farm, where his mother was working. She asked Willie where he'd been wandering. Seeing Ramsay, she asked him who he was. Ramsay Rughill introduced himself as a friend of Willie, and when the mother heard his name, she realized he was the son of a lord, so he asked her not to be formal and said he actually had a favor to ask. He said he wanted to buy some farm produce from her and asked how much she could prepare. She said she could manage 3 large bags of rye, 1 large bag of beans, and at most 2 small bags of garlic. He thanked her and asked how much it would cost in total. She said the total was 600 rubles, but offered to accept 500 rubles. Ramsay paid in advance, and she thanked him, saying she would hand the goods to Willie. Ramsay left convinced he had done the minimum needed to prepare. Just before dawn at Ramsay's house, his parents saw him off as he prepared to leave. He thanked them for helping him get that far and said he would never forget their kindness. His mother said he didn't need to leave so soon and asked if he really planned to work hard in his territory, but he denied it, saying he wanted to prepare as quickly as possible and reminded himself he didn't dislike his parents. With those brothers around, he couldn't imagine staying in that house. His father said he understood and, true to his word, reluctantly handed him the deed to the territory. Ramsay accepted it, thanked him warmly, told him to take care, and left. After a while, he got to where Danny and the others were waiting. Danny told him he was late. Rans apologized and said he'd been held up by his parents. Willie showed him the food he'd asked for, and Ramsay thanked him, feeling secure for now but knowing he would need to buy more supplies soon. His name, Rugel, had let him buy everything cheaply that time, but it would not be that easy from then on. He slapped himself awake and told his squad to move out. After riding onto land, Ramsay planted a stick in the ground. They said this would be their base. Roger said he'd go chop some wood, and Willie said he'd check the soil nearby. Danny tried to think of something to do but couldn't, and Ramsay asked him for a favor if Danny was free. He asked him to make a millstone for him. Danny was taken aback and asked whether Ramsay was serious, and Ramsay said he was, and that he was in a hurry because they couldn't do without a millstone since they needed to eat the wheat. Frustrated, Danny left with a green to make the millstone. Willie saw the man leaving and asked Ramsay what was up with him. Ramsay told Willie not to worry because the man had just gone to scout for some stones. Willie told him that, as he'd heard, the soil there wasn't good and the drainage looked poor. Ramsay agreed and said he thought mixing in Natan soil would help, so he asked Willie what he thought, and Willie agreed that for now that was all they could do. Ramsay picked up a hoe and told Willie to pick the best spot and start tilling, then left him to it. He went to the mountains to check on Rogers. He found him and asked how things were going. Rogers told him things were going well and that there was plenty of birch. Further up were the beech and pine trees, and Ramsay asked if they could add more pine and birch when planting. He realized pine resin could be used for fuel, and if they tapped the birch for sap, they could sell it for a good price. Rogers told him that if they grew wild, they could plant them too. Ramsay became excited and told him that once they cut down the nearby trees, they would start planting to prevent landslides. He asked Rogers if he could even grow birch, and Rogers agreed. Helping Rogers cut down trees, he worked while Willie tended tilling and Danny managed the milestone. As the day drew to a close, everyone gathered and Ramsay asked whether he should report the day's progress. He said he had been tilling but the soil was poor. They needed to till properly first, then mix in the mountain soil. Rogers said the birch was coming in well and they had gathered nearly 30 logs. Danny apologized that he had found nothing. Ramsay finished the report, thanked everyone and said let's call it a day. Knowing everyone had a home to return to, he said there was no need for them to camp out like that. They all looked at him awkwardly, and Danny said they would work hard to make the place comfortable quickly. Everyone left, leaving Ramsay alone, so he decided to get ready for camping. Needing water and a fire, he went to the stream to draw water but had nothing to carry it, and the campfire kept coming to mind. It occurred to him that he did not know how to begin one. Warm daytime weather made him forget, and surviving the night without heat was impossible, especially since he had no lighter. Panic set in, but after a while he calmed down and set up camp. By the fire he wrapped himself in a blanket. Forced to borrow some embers from Danny's place, he nearly froze to death. He thought he had planned everything, but he was completely unprepared because he still needed many things to live there. At last he fell asleep. Morning came and his friends' voices woke him. They felt sorry to see him like that, and Ramsay asked when he had fallen asleep. Eric told himself he had to build a house quickly or he would die. Roger believed they needed to eat properly to have strength. Willie decided to plant crops quickly to fill their bellies. Each of them left knowing they needed to set up a place to live as soon as possible. Ramsay said he needed to get moving too. At the stream he drank and realized that although he had been thinking about food, he needed to make utensils first. Although he couldn't make fine pottery, he had learned the basics in elementary school and thought he could manage some simple earthenware. Finding some clay, he mixed it thoroughly with water and shaped it into a pot. It seemed best to let it dry for about 2 weeks at that stage, but he knew he couldn't afford to be slow, so he decided to experiment and expected a few failures. After letting them sunbathe for a while, he drove them to the campfire, and when the time was right, he tossed it into the fire. In the end, he was left with an ugly pot. It disappointed him. He knew he hadn't left it to dry or bake long enough and had to watch the fire's temperature while making it. After trying it, he was relieved he could at least fill it with water. He set the pot over the campfire and added salt, beans with thinly sliced garlic. He made a garlic and bean soup seasoned with salt. Doubting it even qualified as cooking, he went to dig in and realized there was no cutlery, so he just went for it. He drank straight from the pot and felt satisfied with the food. I couldn't believe plain boiled beans could taste that good. Once he finished it, he returned to making pots. A few of his pots and cups came out ugly. He said practicality mattered more than artistry, and if it was a bit rough but worked, it was good enough. By evening, Ramsay realized pottery took a whole day, and he would need to try other things. At that moment, Willie called to say everyone had gathered. Ramsay said he was on his way, and when. Arriving, he asked everyone where Danny was since he hadn't shown up that day. Rogers said Danny was thrilled about finding the best stone, and Ramsay cried when he heard this, believing Danny was truly trying to make the stone knell. Eric showed him the small cot he'd built for him. Ramsay was thrilled to see it and thanked Eric. Rogers said it was really just a roof and a floor, but Willie said it was better than nothing. After everyone left at night, Ramsay cleaned up and got ready for bed. After throwing together a makeshift stove, he wanted a solid brick version and decided to make clay bricks the next day. Lying on his cot, he said that just having a roof and a floor brought him so much relief. He fell asleep. He expected to sleep well that night. The next morning, Danny arrived with others, greeted Ramsay, and told him that having brought what he'd asked for and promising to show it later, he gathered everyone and said, "Let's get started today." Eric asked him why he was in charge. Ramsay divided them into carpentry and farming teams and thanked everyone for their work that day. Herrick and Rogers handled the carpentry, and Willie and Danny managed the farming. Ramsay knew building their shelter was urgent, and they planned to plant rye by mid-April. He wanted to expand the fields as much as possible in the next 2 weeks and was sure that if everyone worked together, they could do it. After a while, Danny came over and told everyone to give his handmade stone knell a try. Roger said he would vote for it to succeed, but Eric said he would vote for it to fail, and Willie agreed. Danny told everyone not to place bets without permission. Ramsay said it at least looked decent, and Danny told him not to just call it nice. Put in Ryan and try grinding. After trying it, they noticed something was wrong and doubted it was working. When they opened it, they found it was not grinding properly, and its efficiency was low. Ramsay then told Danny that the stone nil had grooves and showed him how it should look by drawing it in the sand. Danny said it was a hassle and would take a bit longer to finish. The rest of the guys wondered who had won, then Roger said it did grind, so he won. They talked among themselves, and Ramsay watched them with a smile, thinking they were making steady progress. Real development in their Bartlett territory was about to begin. 2 weeks had passed since Ramsay moved into the territory. He observed the development was going well and was beginning to feel like a village there. He noted that the growing number of allies was a major factor, since 3 new people had joined Ramsay in his quest. Henry was 15, outgoing, and lived to draw. Gordon was 19 and had a strong sense of justice. One was very caring, and Charlie was 12, younger than Ramsay, a bit timid and physically weak. All 3 of them were farmers' kids, so the fields were expanding quickly. Ramsay noticed it was turning into an all-boy village. They had improved the mill so it could grind fine flour. At that time, bread and dumplings were their main food. Danny moved to the village too. Ramsay was annoyed at night by Danny's snoring. He was pleased to see his territory develop. The next day, Ramsay told everyone it was finally time to plant the seeds. He said Eric was finishing the house, so all 7 would divide the work and get it done. Willie told everyone to cover the seeds thoroughly. The planting mix was 70% rye and 30% beans with garlic. Someone asked Willie if they could finish in 1 day, and Willie told Ramsay that finishing within 5 days would be fine. After some time, Henry said he wanted a girlfriend. He told Danny to introduce him to a girl. Danny asked about the girl he was introduced to afore, and he said she was marrying his brother. He said he believed that once he had a house in the fields he could get married, and Danny joked that he now had fields but no house. Henry laughed, but Ramsay saw that the lack of women was a problem because their territory could not grow without them. Danny asked Willie if he wanted a girlfriend too, and Willie said he already had a fiancée. The news stunned everyone. Danny and Henry asked him if he was serious and where she was. Willie said she was Kathy from Peter's place. Frustrated, Danny said he'd been eyeing her and asked again if she was cute, and Willie replied that she was the sort of person you just wanted to protect. The banter continued for a bit. Eric came back and tried to say something, but he stopped and asked where the others had gone. Ramsay said they returned to Rugal village to pursue their dream, which confused Eric. A few days later, Ramsay told everyone the planting was finished, so they would explore the mountains together that day. He told the group they would climb the mountain in shifts to reach the top and gather wild strawberries and mountain vegetables. They headed out to find spring water from the melted snow. Danny turned it into a race, saying whoever reached the top first would win. Ramsay tried to stop him. Eric joined Danny, saying he was known as Rugal Village's sewer rat and wouldn't lose in speed, while Gordon called from the back to ask if that was meant as a compliment. Danny told Eric he was known as Danny the Skirt Lifter and would not lose any speed. Gordon then asked whether that was a compliment. Danny shot back at Gordon, telling him to shut up because Gordon was the only one with a girlfriend. Eric joined in, saying they were talking about the fun stuff without him. Gordon tried to break away and take the lead. Danny tried to stop him, but all 3 ran ahead of the mountain. Roger saw they were too fast and could not follow. After a while, Ramsay asked everyone whether they had found the spring water. Danny and Eric looked away, embarrassed. Willie and Gordon reported they had found several spots where berries were growing, but no spring water. Ramsay realized it would be difficult to find. At that moment, Charlie approached him, telling him he had heard the sound of water. He led everyone to where he'd found it. They were almost at the base of the mountain, and Henry wondered if the water was this close. After a few moments of listening, they heard the sound of water. Danny wondered how they hadn't noticed it, and Gordon said it was because they were making so much noise. They followed the sound and finally found the spring water. Ramsay wondered how they would get it to the base. If they had bamboo, they could have used it as a waterway, but he had seen none nearby. He asked everyone whether they had any rope, and they all said no. Ramsay decided they had to use brute force to create a path from the spring to the base. He planned it first. One person would go down to a spot where they could see the base. Henry volunteered. Then another person went down and stopped where they could see the first. Gordon decided to do the same. They repeated the process, and finally, Ramsay would draw a line connecting everyone, and they would follow it and trample the path underfoot. He told everyone to remove any pesky weeds to make it easier to move with. Now they could make a round trip from the base to the spring in 5 minutes. Ramsay said securing the water source was a success. A few days later, Danny was walking through Rugal village. "I'm disappointed." Eric met him and Danny asked how things were going. Both were disappointed after another day of failed flirting, and Danny said he wanted a girlfriend too. Eric said that searching for a girl in that tiny village had its limits and suggested they head to another village, knowing they'd probably get strange looks. Danny said they should finish up there now. They had walked for a while when they heard a noise, and it was Ramsay's older brother Paul asking his worker what his idiot brother was up to, and why he had not taken his own life. Seeing this, Danny recognized Paul as Ramsay's brother. Paul's workers told him that Ramsay's village was doing well. They had fewer than 10 people helping him, and they were all third or fourth sons who could not inherit from their families. Paul became frustrated when he heard this, accused Ramsay of moving into his territory without permission, and vowed to end him. Eric told Danny that Ramsay had officially received land from his father, and that this was troubling Paul. The worker asked Paul what to do about it. Paul said he should just burn the village down. Eric and Danny were stunned to hear this. They hurried to Ramsay to tell him about it. Ramsay greeted them, saying he was making a map of the area with Henry and that his drawing skills were a big help. Danny told him it was not the time for that. Ramsay asked if anything had happened, and they both told him what they'd heard. Ramsay saw that Paul planned to burn the village and said his idiot brother only knew how to stir up traffic. Eric asked him what they would do if they actually attacked them. Ramsay said he'd think it over, and when Eric said they couldn't just sit around, he reassured them it was fine and went back to the map. Danny remained unsure about this. Sometime later, Willie told Ramsay he wanted to grow grapes. He asked if they could grow them around there, and Willie said he didn't see why not, since grapes are pretty resilient even in poor soil. Gordon said he used to grow them at home, so he could help out. Henry said he definitely wanted to drink some wine, and Ramsay said they could store wine for a long time too. After he said they would prepare a vineyard, everyone began to plan, and Danny and Eric arrived looking uneasy. Seeing it, Ramsay asked everyone to take care of the rest, and Gordon and Charlie agreed to handle it. Ramsay left the others and went to Danny and Eric to tell them he was busy planning. Danny said he knew what was asked about Paul. Ramsay told Danny he believed it would all work out somehow. Danny was shocked to hear that. Ramsay left before he could say anything, saying they would talk again. Several days later, Eric and Danny returned to the village, still unable to pick any girls. Eric said they had not yet solved the problem with Paul and wondered what Ramsay was planning. Danny wondered whether the territory would really burn and said they would go back to square one. Eric grew annoyed, grabbed his shirt, and told him not to mess with. He had stirred them all up, so he could not imagine going back alone. Danny asked what was going on and what he was supposed to do. Eric grew more annoyed. He hunched over Danny and told him to wake up. Danny smiled, wiped his face, then kicked Eric in the stomach and said that was rich coming from him. Seeing the fight, the crowd closed in around them. Danny asked Eric to let him go, but Eric said he had to apologize first. The crowd cheered them on to fight. At that moment, Paul and his workers were nearby, saw the gathered crowd, and asked what the noise was about. Eric won the fight and walked away. Danny is lying on the ground. Paul recognized Danny when he saw him. He told his worker to take Danny with them, and the workers lifted him and carried him to their base. Danny woke up, still sore from his fight with Eric. He didn't know where he was. In a storage shed, he saw Raugel's mansion just outside. Realizing he was in Paul's playground, he saw Paul come over and sit beside Danny, questioning him about what he was doing there. Danny said nothing, and Paul demanded an answer, saying Danny was no longer part of the village and that Paul knew Danny had been hanging out with Ramsay. Danny denied it, laughing and leaving Paul shocked. He said he couldn't stand the dull village life. Danny said he was returning to his village and introduced himself as Danny from Rugel. Paul laughed, and Danny continued. Someone asked who wanted to handle that dull land development. Paul invited Danny to join them. His workers said Paul's place was the best, where they could drink good liquor and meet many attractive women. Danny became excited and said it would be great. Smiling, Paul realized he had found a weakness in Ramsay's camp, and they needed to seize it. He reached out to Danny and said it was a deal. He would look forward to working with him. Danny shook his hand and agreed to the deal. Within a few days, Danny was drinking and seeing women, saying this was the life. Drinking with cute girls during the day was the best, he said, and Paul looked at him. Someone said it was time to crush Ramsay and his gang. The workers asked whether the time had finally come and if they were ready to follow Paul. Danny told Paul it was too early to say whether they were going to do it. They might as well wait until autumn. Paul found that confusing and asked what he meant and whether he planned to show them mercy. Danny denied it, saying they were busy planting wheat and beans, so it was better to wait for the harvest and collect everything at once. Paul accepted this. They said they would wait until autumn, and meanwhile he would get ready to smash them, which excited his workers. Now back in Ramsay's territory, Roger approached Ramsay and asked if there was a problem. He said it wasn't like that. He hadn't seen Danny recently and wondered what had happened, while Ramsay tried to cover it up by saying he'd been busy charming girls. He wouldn't worry about it too much. Roger laughed while Eric watched them with concern, then approached Ramsay to say something, but Ramsay stopped him and said it was fine because he was already thinking about his next move. He said they would go meet Baron Hendrik and that he was heading a little north. Hearing that surprised everyone. Charlie asked if the north was Baron Hendrik's territory. Ramsay confirmed it, saying he would sell any wood the village did not need, that the biggest town there was Hendos, the Baron's capital, and that he'd already loaded logs onto the cart and was ready to go. Herrick asked if this was the next move he'd mentioned earlier and Ramsay confirmed it. Then Herrick asked whether Ramsay was going to town and could pick up some nails, and Ramsay said he would, adding a wry insult. Reaching Hendos took about half a day, so he expected to be back the next day. Kathy, engaged to Willie, was there too, and Ramsay told her he was counting on her to handle everyone's meals for a while. She understood and he left. After a few exhausting hours, pulling the cart alone was harder than he expected, and his spirit faltered. After a while he finally saw the town of Hendos, having spent twice as long walking there as he expected and realizing coming alone had been a mistake and he should have asked for help. Approaching the town, soldiers restrained him and asked what he wanted. They noticed he had come from a lumber yard. Ramsay said it was his first time there and asked where the shop that bought lumber was. Smiling, the soldier told him to go through the gate and turn left. When the soldier opened the gate for him, they warned him not to be shocked. When Randy saw the town, seeing such a lively place shocked him. He noted it was no surprise that it was the Baron's capital. After searching, he finally found the lumber store. At the shop, the owner greeted him and noticed he had come to sell some wood. Examining the wood, he said the quality and quantity looked good and offered 1,000 rubarbara. Ramsay considered it. They asked for more, saying it was a hassle to bring it all the way there and that it was in great condition. The owner pushed back and asked for 1,200 rubarbara, saying that was his limit, and Ramsay agreed. The owner gave him a bag filled with rhubarb. Renzi and Thinkton left. Paused to think about what came next. He arrived at a seamstress's shop and requested a suit be made. The woman inside asked what he wanted, and he said he needed a decent outfit to meet the Lord without spending much, so the seamstress said she would make it from the cheapest linen for 200 rubers, and Ramsay agreed. She measured him for the suit. He asked how long it would take, and she said it would be ready in about 3 days. Leaving the shop, he went to Baron Hendrik's residence. Claiming to be a messenger for Baron Hans Ruggel, he told the guard outside that his lord wished to meet Baron Hendrik, and the guard asked him to wait as they went inside. After a while they returned, apologized for the delay, and told him that the lord was busy and would only have time in 10 days, so he asked if that was acceptable. Renzi agreed, saying his lord would be pleased. He left there feeling happy. Convinced he had the right outfit for meeting the Baron and that the appointment was confirmed, he now only needed to buy the necessary items. After buying nails, rye, and salt, he packed them into his cart and was ready to leave. Seeing it was already dark and that he couldn't afford to waste money or stay overnight in town, he decided to tough it out and head back that night. When Ramsay returned to his village, Gordon asked if he was okay since Ramsay had been gone a long time. Ramsay told him he had handled everything and finished the prep work, and that in 10 days he would finally need Baron Hendrik. Gordon apologized for bothering him as soon as he got back and said that yesterday when he passed through Rugal village, he saw Danny with his brother Paul. He said he did not want to think about it, but then asked whether Danny might have betrayed them. Ramsay smiled and said he had to tell everyone. He shared something with everyone. The scene shifted to June 25. On the day Ramsay was to meet the Baron, Rogers went with him and was surprised to find Hendos so large. Rogers thanked Ramsay for bringing him, and Ramsay said he wanted to sell some firewood too, so Rogers' help had been a lifesaver. He said they would explore the city after finishing their business, so they would sell this lumber first. When Ramsay arrived at the shop, the owner recognized them from an earlier visit. He noticed the man had brought many more that day, and Ramsay said they were brought in pairs this time. The owner said he would set the price quickly and asked them to wait a moment. Rogers told Ramsay he was sure they'd get a good price. After looking at the lumber and thinking it over, the owner told them that with this, he could only offer 2,500 rubra, and Rogers was shocked to hear that. Someone said that was far too low. The owner apologized, said he had plenty of birch and offered 2,700 and told them to try elsewhere if that was not acceptable. Ramsay accepted the deal and sold the wood. Rogers was disappointed because he had expected 3,000 rhubarb. Ramsay said nothing could be done and they should leave the cart and move on. They arrived together at the seamstress's shop, where she welcomed Ramsay and said his suit was ready. Ramsay wore the suit, and when the seamstress asked what he thought, said it fit perfectly. Rogers praised him, saying he looked great. Ramsay thanked him and said that in that outfit he should be fine meeting the Baron. He asked whether they should go. Soon they reached the Baron's place. He told the guards he was Hans Rugel and that he had commissioned his father's representative. He asked for an audience with Baron Hendrik. The soldier greeted Rans as lord and asked him to wait a moment, and Rogers remembered that Rans was also a noble. Inside the palace, a maid greeted them, thanked them for their patience, and offered to show them the way. They followed her, and Rogers admired the palace's beauty. The mage led them into the room and invited them inside. Once they entered the room and sat down, the maid left and told them to wait there for a moment. Rogers was still amazed, telling Ramsay it was an incredible mansion. Ramsay agreed, saying it was the Baron's residence that governed the area. That was exactly why he had come, if he could secure Baron Hendrik's assistance. Before he could finish his sentence, Baron Hendrik entered, filling the room with a commanding presence. He apologized to Ramsay for making him wait. Ramsay bowed, saying he did not mind. Raising his head, he saw Baron Hendrik. He wasn't sure he could win the Baron's support. Ramsay told the Baron he was honored to meet him and introduced himself as Ramsay Rugel, son of Hans Rugel. The Baron greeted Ramsay and introduced himself as Darrell von Hendrik, the ruler of that territory. He motioned to a chair and asked what was on his mind. Ramsay sat down. He focused on recalling the negotiations from his past life and knew he had to act properly around his superior. He had to steer the negotiation wisely. A maid entered and served them wine. The Baron asked if he enjoyed wine and told them they were free to indulge. Ramsay thanked him but declined the offer, saying the other man seemed busy, and proceeded straight to the main topic. He handed the Baron's butler an official paper, and the butler said he would handle it. Opening it, he handed it to the Baron. The Baron read it, and after a while, it was understood that Ramsay, Lord Rughel's third son, had been granted the Northern Territory. The Baron said he had come there expecting more, and asked whether Ramsay wanted to work as his retainer, because Ramsay could not manage the wasteland. Ramsay denied it, saying that although the offer was tempting, he had chosen a different path. Signaling Rogers, he received the bag of money they had gotten from selling the lumber. He opened it, showed the money they had, and told the Baron that, according to the letter, he had been granted land, established his territory, and changed his surname to Bartlett. He asked the Baron to place him under his protection. The Baron regarded him and called it interesting, saying he would recognize Ramsay as Sir Ramsay Bartlett, but that entering his protection came at a cost, and he asked if that was acceptable, which Ramsay agreed to. The Baron asked how large his village was. Ramsay said it was not really a village, but a settlement of about 10 people. The Baron told him they would pay the Hendrik family 30,000 rubelet each year, starting next year. Ramsay was shocked to learn he had to save 2,500 rubiala each month, because their only resources were wheat and timber. The trees were limited, planting was slow, and they lacked manpower, so he wondered if the Baron could lower the tax a bit. Before he could ask, the Baron made clear that not a single coin would be cut. Ramsay sighed, knowing desperate times required desperate measures. Ramsay told the Baron he accepted those conditions. The Baron said it was a wise decision. The butler handed him a paper, and he began writing the official order, asking if that was all Ramsay wanted. Ramsay denied it and said he wanted one more thing. He instructed the Baron to inform Lord Rugel that they would not interfere, and the Baron was surprised. Ramsay said his father had officially granted him land, but House Rugel's eldest and second sons were angry and were said to be planning to set fires when the opportunity arose. The Baron agreed, noting a drop in tax revenue would be bad for them, and told him he would draft a letter right away. Ramsay said he would need a copy too, in case anyone tried to invade his territory. He made it clear that they would not be held accountable if they took down the invader. The Baron understood and told Ramsay he would order them not to invade, since breaking that command would bring severe punishment. After signing the letter, he handed it to Ramsay. He said he would tell Lord Rughal personally. Ramsay thanked him and took his leave. He and Rogers exited the palace. The Baron watched them from his window. He asked his butler Anthony for his opinion, and Anthony said it was laughable to think such a small sum could sway them. The Baron told him not to be so hard on them because they were simply desperate to survive. A noble must be able to bear such things. Praising Anthony's loyalty to their house, he said it was admirable but sometimes went too far. Anthony apologized. An increase in tax revenue was certainly welcome, he said, and the Baron agreed that signing a few letters for 30,000 rubla was not a bad deal. He did not expect much and wished Ramsay the best. Leaving the palace, Roger said he was starving. To thank him for keeping him company, Ramsay offered to treat him. Rogers brightened and began looking for food, saying he wanted skewers, soup, and bread. Ramsay bought them, and Roger began to eat. He warned him to avoid choking. As Ramsay ate, they noticed a frail child watching them. Rogers asked what was wrong, and when he saw what Ramsay saw, he felt sad too. He asked him if they could do something, and Ramsay said he really wanted to help. He could not. Ramsay moved toward the child and asked whether his stomach was shrinking. The child gave a nod. Rogers handed him his soup. Seeing the child's confused look, Rogers said it was very tasty and told him to eat it while it was warm. Watching the child drink the soup, Ramsay thought Rogers' gluttony had gone too far, but even if this eased their hunger, it would not solve the root problem. Ramsay asked the child if many people like him lived in that town. The child nodded, and Ramsay thought about it. He asked Rogers if he wanted to help them and added that he could. Someone could lend a hand to save those kids. Rogers agreed and said he would do anything to help. Ramsay then made a decision and thanked Rogers. He gathered people in similar situations at the lumber yard and went shopping. Rogers went through the town with the child, gathering people who had no homes, jobs, or food. Ramsay went to the store and bought a few items. Rans arrived at the lumber yard a while later and saw a crowd. Meeting Rogers, he told him he had done a good job gathering a large crowd. Rogers said that only showed how many people were in need. Ramsay knew that in the shadows of Hendo's rich city, many people went hungry with no one to help them. Believing that welcoming them as citizens of the Bartlett territory would save everyone, he shouted for everyone to listen. Ramsay Bartlett introduced himself, saying he was the Lord of Bartlett Barony, south of the Hendrik territory. Shock ran through the crowd. He said his territory was chronically short of people and promised that if they cooperated, they would have plenty of food. The crowd began talking among themselves when a woman raised her hand and asked what exactly. Ramsay explained exactly what they needed to do. Working honestly in Bartlett, marrying and starting a family, and living life to the fullest would contribute to the territory's development. When the women asked if that was all, Ramsay said they would have to pay taxes later, but for now he needed their help building the village, and an old man came forward. They told him they did not need an old man like him. Ramsay looked at him and asked his name, and the old man answered Archbold, showed his injured leg, and said it might keep him from helping with the development. Ramsay wondered what had happened to his leg and asked Archbold if he had any fighting skill. Archbold looked surprised, said he understood him well, and added that he had once been a mercenary. Ramsay noticed the scar on his knee and said he must have been a brave warrior. Ramsay told him there were no fighters left in his territory and asked him to train everyone there. Archbold said he was honored and that he would be glad to help if his old buddy could assist. Ramsay thanked him and told him so. He told everyone that even if they were not suited for manual labor, each person had a role to play. Those who wanted to join should come to him or to Rogers. A woman raised her hand and said she would go. After a pause, everyone agreed, and Ramsay began listing them. After a while, he noticed there were 73 people. He told Rogers they'd meet early the next morning and leave right away so they'd arrive by night. Rogers said they had children and elderly people, so they needed to avoid overexerting anyone. Ramsay said he'd head back first. Taken aback, Rogers said he needed to talk to everyone in the village first, because returning suddenly with a crowd would cause chaos, and agreed to stay back looking sad. Ramsay told Roger he was counting on him, and Roger said he'd do his best. Ramsay saw an opportunity to grow the village, but wasn't sure how to explain it to everyone. On June 26, Ramsay returned to the village. Willie welcomed him back, and Ramsay asked him to gather everyone for him. During the visit, he told everyone that Baron Hendrik had recognized him as a viscount, so the Bartlett territory was now under the Baron's protection. Henry and Eric were excited to hear this. He said he'd also heard that Paul and his group were planning an attack, asked again if it was about the incident the other day, and Eric called it a hassle. Ramsay assured them it was taken care of, saying a letter from the Baron to Lord Rugal was on the way forbidding any interference, and anyone who disobeyed would face severe punishment, so they need not worry. Eric brightened at the news, and Gordon could tell he had been especially worried. He told them there was bad news, that in return for the Baron's protection, they would have to pay 30,000 rubies each year. The news shocked and worried everyone, and Ramsay tried to calm them, saying that in Rugal's territory it had been double, 60,000 rubira, that this was lower than last year, and that they were exempt this year, so they could all pull together. There was one more thing, he said, and it was not all bad. Eric asked about the hesitation. Willie told him to spit it out, and Ramsay said that a multitude of people kept coming into this domain, leaving everyone confused. He told them what had happened, and Willie said Roger and Ramsay had been charmed by those beggars. Henry and Gordon were somewhat skeptical. Ramsay said he intended to pay everyone fairly afterward, and asked whether that would be acceptable. Henry said it was a good deed. Willie was glad the village would be bustling, and Eric was excited that there would be girls. Ramsay said everyone supported it. Gordon put his hand on his shoulder and said that if that was the case, they needed to prepare to welcome them and divide the roles. Kathy said she would prepare the meals, and Ramsay offered to help. He added that because everyone would be hungry, they should make ripe porridge to avoid shocking their stomachs. Willie agreed to tend the fields, and Henry said he would fetch more spring water than usual. Charlie wasn't sure what to do, and Gordon said that since there would be more people, they should make everyday items like dishes and spoons. Eric said he'd stick to carpentry as usual, but would make sure cotton was ready. Ramsay asked him whether they had built a few houses for everyone to live in, and Eric replied they were not finished yet, but more hands would speed things up. Willie asked Ramsay when Roger and the others would arrive, and Ramsay said they planned to leave early and should get there by evening or at night, and Charlie and Gordon couldn't shape the utensils properly, so Kathy stepped in to help. Night had fallen, and Henry searched for them, but saw no sign of anyone coming. Ramsay wondered if they'd gotten lost in the dark, and if they should go meet them, so Gordon and Eric volunteered to come. They looked for them, and Eric asked if they were really coming. Suddenly they heard a noise, and saw Roger with people behind him. Roger waved at them while Ramsay said he was late and was worried, and Roger said the cart was very heavy and asked Eric to switch with him. Eric was busy flirting with the women, asking one if she was all right and welcoming her to his territory, while Gordon scolded him and Ramsay asked if anyone felt unwell or was injured, and Roger said they were fine. Thanking everyone for their hard work on the long journey, he said the village was just ahead and asked them to hold on a little longer. Rescheduled for the 1st of July at the Rugal family's house, where Hans had called for his eldest son, Paul. Arriving with his sibling, he asked why he had been called, and Hans showed him the letter. Someone told him to read it, and Paul noticed the letter had the Hendrik family seal. Reading the letter shocked him. The Hendrik family declared Ramsay Bartlett a viscount and banned anyone from harming the land or its people. Paul got angry about this, asked Hans what it was, and said they should protest it. Hans told him not to be foolish and asked what he planned to protest. Paul said Ramsay was taking the territory without permission, and Hans told him he had officially ceded it because he had merely been handed unused land. Paul, frustrated by this, left, while his sibling chased him. Sighing at this, they were glad to see Ramsay doing well. It became clear to him that Ramsay's request for the land transfer document back then had been preparation for this moment. Even though the child was his, he was amazed at the child's foresight and went to tell his wife Helena. Paul was at his place having a drink. Furious that he had been so close to storming in on Ramsay, he was ready to crush everything in his path. His younger brother tried to calm him, but he snapped, told him to shut up, and said they all needed to figure out what to do about those guys. Both his brother and his worker left him alone. The scene moved to Danny, and he said the time had come. Approaching Asma, the hunter's third son, he said he would take him down. Ozma said they should grab the weapons and armor there, and that he had a cart nearby. Danny said he was glad to be riding with him. Ozma denied it, saying his brother was watching him, and that hunting in a new land could be a good change, and Danny told him he was counting on him. Ozma said he should head to the village first, and Danny agreed, saying he would catch up in no time. Ozma headed to the village, and Danny went over to the girl he'd met at the pub. Colette was her name, and he told her he was heading back to Ramsay. He asked her if she would like to join him. She told him to give her a moment to think, then slammed the door in his face. Having essentially rejected him, Danny knew he couldn't wallow in sadness because he had other houses to visit. He visited the homes of Roger's girlfriend, Gordon's girlfriend, and Alyssa to invite them, and they agreed to go to Bartlett village. Danny felt sad because he couldn't convince his girlfriend to come. That morning, Danny slapped Ramsay to wake him. Ramsay woke up, hurried over, and saw Ozma and Danny there. He was glad to be back, and Danny apologized for keeping him waiting and said he'd brought a little something too. Danny introduced his ally Ozma, and Ozma told him to leave the hunting to him. Danny noticed many more people in the village and said a lot had happened. Gordon hugged Danny and said he was shocked to learn Danny had betrayed them. Danny apologized, explaining he had misled his own team to fool the enemy and that buying time had helped them. Eric came and asked what was in the card he brought. Danny said he had gathered every weapon Paul had prepared, and that should keep them quiet for a while. Ramsay praised Danny as very reliable, and Danny grinned at the compliment. Ramsay then told him to take over as captain of the soldiers there while he was at it. Danny agreed, but then he realized he had made a mistake. Renzi phoned Archibald and introduced Danny as their candidate for soldier captain. He said he wanted to train them hard and told Danny to listen carefully to Lord Archibald. Back at Paul's place, his worker woke him up. I told him that Danny and Osmo could not be found. Paul was very angry and demanded to know why they treated him that way. He vowed to end them. On July 3, 4 months had passed since the Bartlett territory was established. The population was growing and the village was full of life. They also created a registry for those who moved from Hendos, listing names, ages, and genders to track harvest yields and labor contributions. There were 14 children and 59 adults among the newcomers, including 2 elderly people, with women outnumbering men by about 4 to 3. Most were experienced farmers with a few seamstresses and blacksmiths, and many earned a living doing simple work like transporting goods. They chose to focus on agriculture and assigned roles accordingly. Willie takes care of rye, Gordon manages grapes, Henry tends the beans, and Charlie handles garlic and turnips. Roger, Eric, and Ozma paired each of them with apprentices to help. For now, Danny led 5 soldier trainees, while the others focused on farming and clearing the land. Ramsay saw everyone united and working hard to improve the village. This made him think about how they should expand, since he wanted to create some local specialties too. Ramsay was happy because he'd always wanted to live this kind of life. A few days later, on July 14, Kathy and several other women approached Ramsay. She said she needed to talk to him for a moment. Ramsay felt uneasy, and Kathy showed him the warehouse, saying the stored food was running low and they had only 1 bag of rye left. Ramsay realized this was bad. Kathy warned they would not last more than 10 days at that rate, and he asked Tina to call everyone. Aliza said she'd been cutting back, but it had reached its limit. Ramsay asked if they could harvest the village crops early. After everyone arrived, Ramsay said he wanted to ask everyone something. He asked which crops they were growing now and when they could expect to harvest them. Willie told him they would be ready by next August and the yield looked promising. Henry said the beans should be ready by early August. Gordon said the grapes still needed time, so they should be patient. Charlie said the turnips could be harvested soon. Ramsay and the other women stared at Charlie, so he asked what was wrong. Ramsay showed him the warehouse and said they'd been running out of food, so getting those turnips quickly would be a huge help. Charlie said he had wanted to plant at the start of April to get 3 harvests a year, but he was late this year, so they could only manage this one and another in early November. Kathy asked what kind of yield they were looking at. Charlie said that with everyone eating, it would be about a month's worth. The women began talking and agreed the turnips would last them this month. The beans should be ready by then, and after that they'd have enough so they could manage. But they knew turnips alone would not last half a month, so they planned to gather wild greens and ask Osmo for help. The men thought the women were very reliable. Seeing the food crisis, Ramsay knew he had to devise a plan. That night he went to. Isma ran up to him as he stopped, called him Lord, and asked if he had a moment. He told him to call him Ramsay as usual, and to feel free to ask for anything, and Ramsay said he actually wanted to discuss the food situation. After the situation was explained, Ozma understood and said feeding the whole village would mean targeting large boars, and Ramsay asked if they could aim for something like that. Ozma told him that to some extent the boars were large and left plenty of tracks, and that starting tomorrow he would go after the big game, and Ramsay said he was counting on him. Ramsay left Ozma's place, realizing he couldn't rely on Ozma alone, so he needed another option if one existed, and he mulled it over for a while. That morning, Ramsay went to the spring. The Tej River ran along the border of the royal territory. He thought his plan might work. Planning to try stone fishing, he would strike a rock in the water with another stone to stun nearby fish and then scoop them up. Not wanting to disturb the ecosystem, he still took drastic action when times grew desperate. Lifting a giant stone, he walked on the river, then used it to strike a stone, making the nearby fish rise. Determined to give his best to everyone in the village, he did everything he could. Soon he caught many fish and loaded them into his cart. He wanted to get it home while they were still fresh and believed everyone would be happy when. On returning, he saw everyone talking among themselves. At that moment, Kathy called Ramsay to ask where he'd been, and when he tried to tell her about the fish she had, she said it was not the right time. But Ozma had brought back a big boar for them. Ramsay tried again to tell her he had caught some fish too, but Kathy ignored him while she thought about how to cook the boar. Renzi felt sad after trying his best, and Danny comforted him, saying it was just bad timing. By the 2nd of August, a bountiful harvest had ripened. Ramsay asked Willie if they could harvest now, but Willie refused, saying they needed to ripen a little more. He left the decision to Willie and asked Willie to call when it was time to harvest. Ramsay then visited Henry to ask how things were, and Henry said the harvest looked great. Ramsay asked Henry about expanding the fields, and Henry said he had organized the tasks and would bring the map later for Ramsay to check. Ramsay offered to help with the farming, but Henry refused, saying it wasn't necessary and Ramsay should just relax. Ramsay left Henry, thinking how bored he was. After finishing the village expansion paperwork, and with Roger and Eric having apprentices, he was left twiddling his thumbs. Danny arrived and saw him just lazing around. Dancy saw Danny's plan and tried to back out, saying he had things to take care of, but Danny grabbed him, took him to Archibald, and said Ramsay would start training today. Archibald was relieved to hear that, because as a lord he had to fight to protect his people. First he put on his armor and began to run. The armor was very heavy, so running was difficult for him. Then he practiced swinging a wooden sword, and when he asked how long it would last, Archibald said he would keep at it until he mastered the proper form. Next, Archibald had him start real combat training, telling him to drill slashes, footwork, and other moves until they were ingrained in his body. Renzi sparred alongside Danny. Someone told him he would definitely hold a grudge. Danny said he still held one. Archibald was glad to see everyone in high spirits, but someone said it was just a brawl. By October 15, Paul had returned to the tavern, and his workers noticed he'd been spending far too much time there lately. Paul slid his empty mug down and told the bartender to bring him more booze. Apologizing, the bartender said they were out of ale, and Paul said that if there was no ale, they should bring him wine, mead, or anything else. Ramsay still annoyed him, and he wondered if he could make Ramsay eat his words. At that moment, Ivan, one of his workers, came up to him. He told him that if he didn't like Ramsay, he should just kill him. Paul threw his empty mug at him, called him stupid, and said his father would stop him from doing that. I told him that it might be banned for Paul. They were not nobles, so nothing was off-limits to them. Surprised, Paul laughed and called it a good idea, saying he couldn't believe he hadn't thought of something so simple. It was simple, he said. Instead of Paul Rudgel, they would disguise themselves as thieves and raid their base. Knowing they were unarmed, he told everyone to hurry and get ready. His worker asked when they would carry it out, and he said after the snow melted. A worker urged him to act immediately, saying his muscles itched for action. Paul told them again he had no weapons. He warned it would take at least 3 months to prepare, and that snow would soon pile up, making it hard to set it ablaze. In his mind, he told Ramsay to just wait, because he was coming to destroy the hideout completely. Rans and Danny were having fun after exhausting themselves in training. By now it was November 3rd, and winter was nearly here in the territory. Ramsay walked and felt a cold breeze. With snow likely to settle by mid-December, he said they needed to get ready for winter and told Danny and Eric he was heading to Hendo's for supplies, asking if they could help. Because he had a lot of lumber this time, Danny agreed to act as his guard. Eric said it sounded fun and decided to come, and he realized they just wanted to hit the town. He understood everyone needed a break sometimes and left it to the two of them. The three headed to Hendo's and arrived on time. The guard recognized Ramsay, and he headed for the lumber yard. He told the owner he wanted to sell some lumber. Seeing that he had brought a huge amount of wood this time, and that it was, as always, top-notch, the owner offered 9,000 rubri for it. Ramsay realized birch was an oversupply, so negotiating the price could be tricky. Danny then told the owner to make it a nice round 10,000 rubar. The owner said it could not be held and insisted on that price. Ramsay was taken aback. They confronted the owner, saying he had told them he had an excess of birch the other day and asked what had happened. The owner struggled to speak, and Ramsay told him to spill the beans and promised to keep coming back for more. The owner said the scoop came from Lord Hendrik of the frontier. Someone had hoarded all the lumber, leaving them short, and since he had brought nearly 3 times the usual amount that year, he wanted to stock up on as much lumber as he could. Ramsay was taken aback, and Danny thanked the owner. As they left, Danny asked if the Lord's household used that much firewood. Ramsay said it was a big mansion, and Danny added that he should have raised the prices. Ramsay said the information would not have come to light if he had not known. He noticed Eric looking at something. Someone asked him if he wanted something. Eric said it was not like that, and Ramsay saw he was looking at charcoal. Danny noticed the charcoal was expensive, and Ramsay said it was because winter was coming and demand was rising. Eric asked if they could make charcoal in the Bartlett territory, and Ramsay agreed. He remembers a TV show from his past where an idol group built a charcoal kiln from scratch. Ramsay said they could. Eric got excited and said they should make charcoal themselves, and Danny doubted any advantage and said firewood was fine. Eric said charcoal was selling high, and Danny said they could just buy it at a good price, so making charcoal would be a waste of effort. After a brief argument, Ramsay tried to stop them, saying both sides had valid points. When Eric asked why, he explained that he had told him to hold off for now. At first, even when they could make charcoal, half-baked pieces could explode and be unsafe to use. There was no difference in burn time between firewood and charcoal, only whether it smoked. Visible smoke was better to prevent poisoning. Eric understood, and Danny praised him as surprisingly knowledgeable. Rands. They suggested that if they had extra, they could try making some since it would be good to learn. Eric was pleased to hear it and said they should finish their shopping quickly. They all agreed after buying many items. Danny asked if they really had to stock up that much, and Ramsay said they did because food disappeared quickly. Eric grew frustrated when he saw they had brought Ryan and that Ryan wanted wheat. Danny said he thought growing rye in the village was easier and asked if they could just buy wheat. Ramsay told them rye was cheaper than wheat, and at the time they needed quantity more than taste, and rye was more nutritious. Eric and Danny were surprised. Ramsay thought that in a world without hospitals, if anyone got sick they either healed themselves or died. Wanting them to stay healthy, Ramsay told them to load up and head back to the village, and they all agreed. After loading up, everyone realized it was very heavy because they'd packed too much, and Eric asked when they would get back. Ramsay said they should switch off and keep pushing. Eric asked Danny to let him take leave for a while. Seeing the cart was very heavy, Ramsay thought about its weight. On November 10, Danny and Ramsay were digging the ground. Danny said he had just told them they weren't going to make charcoal and asked why he was trying to build a charcoal kiln that day. Ramsay said he had not planned it yet, but his reasoning remained sound, and he added that he had realized something. That proved the firewood was heavy. Ramsay said that if they carbonized it and removed the moisture, it would be much lighter and easier to transport and use. Danny agreed, and Ramsay said he would need Danny's help. Danny agreed to help. After digging a large hole, they built a flue and coated the walls with clay, and Ramsay told Danny not to forget to line the bottom with straw. They tightly packed all wood that could become charcoal, like logs and branches, and layered rye husks and similar material to reduce oxygen exposure. After sealing the entrance with bricks, they lit the wood inside, closed it off completely, and the charcoal kiln was finished. Danny asked if this would actually make charcoal, and Ramsay said he wasn't very confident, but it might, adding they'd refine it as they went. 2 kids appeared, returning from the mountain, where they had been collecting leaves and twigs. They spotted Ramsay and Danny, and Ramsay asked what they were doing out there. So the girl said she had come to gather leaves and branches for the campfire because it was cold, and Ramsay warned her not to wander too far from the village since the mountains could be dangerous, and she agreed. Danny said he would help too, but the boy told him to get back to work. He then said he had just finished another task, and Ramsay thought about what else they needed to prepare. I approached Henry and asked about crafting in winter. Ramsay said that once the snow piled up they could not farm, so he thought making wooden crafts would be a good idea. Henry asked whether he meant spoons and forks, and Ramsay agreed, saying he had asked Charlie to make a prototype. They entered a house where Charlie and Aliza were working with wood. Charlie said he had tried making a chair, and Ramsay said it looked great, adding that the chairs might not be big enough to sell but should work fine in the village. Aliza's work seemed odd to him. When he asked what she was making, she was surprised he could not tell. She told him it was definitely a bear with a fish in its mouth, and Ramsay was shocked. When he heard that, he said he hoped they would sell well, and Aliza, confident they were a masterpiece, said it was obvious they would sell. Ramsay called Charlie and said that, since their wood was limited, he wanted to keep Aliza away from it. Charlie agreed. Aliza asked whether something was wrong, and Ramsay said it was nothing. Ramsay suggested the skilled workers make figurines or decorations, while the others could make spoons and bowls. Aliza said scenes seemed safe enough. Ramsay gave the assignment to Henry and Charlie and said he would take a short tour of the village. At that moment, Eric called Ramsay to say the construction crew had gathered. Ramsay said they should begin renovating each house. They go house to house, preparing each one for winter. They had to be careful with heating for the winter, so they installed simple fireplace flues in each small house to prevent frostbite and carbon monoxide poisoning. They turned that area into a fireplace, and he told the other workers to make sure the chimney was tall enough to vent outside, adding that the houses were built the same so they would do the same for the others. Eric and the others were ready to get back to work, and Ramsay left them to it. Relieved, he saw they would now just manage to be ready for winter. The first winter arrived in the Barlet territory. A few days later, Danny joined a snowball fight with other kids who scolded him and told him to act his age. Danny said it was too sweet and that age didn't matter in a serious match. Suddenly, Eric threw a snowball that hit him in the face, so he called Eric a jerk and Eric called him a slowpoke. After a brief fight, the children planned to gang up and take them both out. From his cabin, Ramsay watched and could not believe they were still doing it in that cold. Winter had fully arrived in the Bartlett territory, and the snow reached his waist. After distributing supplies, he worried about the residents stuck inside and wanted to go check on them. Still, he realized he was running very low on money. They needed a reliable income to pay Baron Hendrik's taxes, and he thought about how to earn the money. He realized there were two approaches. One was to increase productivity and sell a large volume of goods. We realized relying on manpower alone was not practical, so they needed to streamline farming and forestry. Picturing tractors and chainsaws, he realized their current technology left him imagining only things they could not build, so he saw the method would not work and moved on to consider another option, which added value directly to the products. He searched for goods that would sell for a good price. Grapes were not ready for harvest, and they could not get enough animal pelts to sell. Rye, beans, turnips, and timber were available, and rye seemed the most suitable for consumption. Searching for a rye-based product, he heard a voice and saw Danny and Eric frozen. He noted the kids had so much energy it was a problem. Eric agreed, and they sat outside the fireplace. They said the place was full of dresses, and in that cold, he could really use something to warm him from the inside. Hearing that, Ramsay had an idea. With rye, alcohol would be easy to make. A memory came back of his past life in the northern lands. A young exchange student named Arjun came from even farther north and told them they could make alcohol from bread. His method for making the alcohol was so simple it hardly stuck in his memory. Ramsay called everyone and told them to brew some alcohol. Willie and Gordon came to help, and Gordon said he had prepared rye bread as he said. Ramsay thanked him. They were preparing kvass, a mildly alcoholic drink widely enjoyed in Russia and beyond. The downside was it wouldn't reach 3% alcohol. They started by baking the rye bread until it was golden brown, having dissolved the yeast in warm water beforehand to encourage fermentation. They put warm water into a large jar, add toasted bread, wild berries, and fermented yeast, then cover it, and the berries let the sugars ferment into alcohol while improving the flavor. All that remained was to wait for the fermentation to finish. Willie asked how long they should let it sit. Ramsay said he did not know and told them to taste it every half day. Danny offered to taste it, but Eric cut him off, saying Danny had no palate and asking Ramsay to leave it to him. Ramsay said he would bring it to both of them and told them not to drink it without permission. They drink it in between and afterward. A few days later, the pot was empty. Both sat down, guilt on their faces. Ramsay expected this even though others were angry, and he asked which time would be best. Danny said the morning of the third day, and Eric said he thought it was the second night. Ramsay asked if it had really turned into alcohol, and Danny confirmed, saying he felt warm and believed it had. Willie said the brewing was successful. Gordon said they needed to figure out how much rye to use for brewing, and Ramsay said he would check the ledger and calculate it. Ramsay told Eric and Danny that since they drank it all without permission, their punishment was to pick berries on the mountain. Eric asked whether they had to do it in that cold, and Ramsay said it was a punishment. Eric and Danny went to the mountain in heavy snow to pick berries. On January 6th, a week into the new year, the cold still bit. Ramsay tasted the alcohol and said he would need to add more yeast next time. Just then, Danny King began shouting at Ramsay. Ramsay told him to calm down, and when he came in, Danny said this was not the time and that Paul still wanted to end him. This frustrated Ramsay. He said his brother had a serious obsession and wished he had channeled that passion elsewhere. He asked Danny where he'd heard that, and Danny said he'd been going back to Rugal village to see his girlfriend and had heard it there. Ramsay said they should discuss what to do next and told him to call Ozma, an old archibald, on his behalf. Danny agreed and took them to Ramsay's house. Ramsay apologized to Archibald for disturbing him in the snow. Archibald asked what kind of trouble they were in now. Danny explained the situation and said Paul had been stockpiling weapons in armor again. Ozma asked if the story was credible, and Danny said he heard it from Colette in Rugal village and suggested sending someone to scout if they doubted it. And Ozma added that Earl had told Paul not to mess with Ramsay and asked whether Paul had not gotten the message. Archibald said that even after the warning, he still wanted the Lord's head, and Ramsay said he was fine as long as no one found out he was the killer. He said the problem was that the conditions favored him far too much. Danny asked about it, and he explained that Paul would win by taking him down, and Paul would lose if he was captured or killed. Their side only had to fend him off while keeping damage to a minimum. Ozma said burning their homes would be a hassle, and Ramsay said the timing of the attack was his choice, so everything was in Paul's hands. Archibald said it was best to lure Paul out and strike. Ozma said Ramsay would likely be the bait, but the village could be attacked in the meantime. Denny asked whether he should report this to Ramsay's father and have the father rein Ramsay in. Ramsay said Paul and the others would play dumb since they were working in secret, and in any case he thought they should act after the snow melted. He said they should gather information and prepare a plan by then. On January 11, Ivan and Paul walk into the house. One of his workers saw the armor and swords and said they were fine gear. He asked Paul how he had gotten hold of it, and Paul said the merchant Slay reported rising tensions in the capital, so they used it to butter up his father. I haven't asked him to try on the armor, but Paul said he could and told him that once the snow melted they'd strike hard, so he should get used to the iron sword by then. One worker asked what they should do about the rat that had slipped in. Paul Therese told him to just let it be. Aware that Ramsay's allies had infiltrated Rugal village, he accepted their claim they came to see their parents and couldn't just be kicked out, so he focused on building his own strength because his main goal was to take down Ramsay, and the other villagers didn't matter as long as they didn't get in the way. He said he would leave his weapons and armor there and told his worker not to lose or steal them. He vowed that if anything happened again, he would make them pay for it. This terrified the workers. Following Paul's order, Ivan went outside to deliver the gate to Tom and John. He said Paul was very demanding because he had to carry a heavy bag through heavy snow and rain. At Tom's house, he knocked on the door and called out to see if Tom was home. The lights were on, so he knocked harder. Tom opened the door and apologized. Someone said he was just having a drink and asked if he wanted to join. Iden agreed to stay for a bit. Tom welcomed him in, and Iden noticed another person inside. I even asked who he was, and Tom said he was his buddy. Henry introduced himself, said he'd brought over a drink, and told Iden it was nice to meet him. He told them the drink was called Kvass and admitted it wasn't the best but was good enough to get you drunk, then saw Ivan with a bag and asked what he was carrying. Iden grew nervous because he could not talk about this with outsiders. He told Henry that tensions in the capital were rising and conscription might be coming. Tom was shocked and asked if that was true. Biden said he didn't know much either and that Paul had told him about it. Handing the bag to Tom, he said it was for him and downed a glass. He said it was surprisingly good. Henry agreed, and Iden said he had not been able to get a drink since Paul started causing chaos. Henry asked how much they would pay for the drink. Ivan said he would pay 3 rubera for a mug because 5 rubera seemed too steep. Ivan and Tom began laughing and enjoying themselves, and Henry realized their plan was working. At Hendrik's palace, he asked his butler about the king's health. The butler told him it did not look good, and it was likely only a matter of time before he died, adding that the succession issue was heating up. Hendrik said the rivalry for the throne between the prince and the king's younger brother was thrilling. King Magic V was wasting away with age and nearing death. The fight for the throne was heating up between Prince Emo and his much younger brother Duke Ignis. Hendrik knew the rightful heir was Prince Emo, but the butler interrupted, saying the prince was a firm supporter of the empire. They looked at a map of the Pindara Empire and knew he had already married a princess from western Pindara and had children, so Hendrik warned that if this continued their kingdom could be swallowed by imperial ambition. When the butler asked whether they should continue supporting Duke Ignis, Hendrik replied that the empire recognized no faith but the Holy Divine Church, which was a serious problem. He thought about what move they should make. The butler asked what the plan was, assuming Hendrik had something in mind, and Hendrik laughed because the butler already knew. He said he planned to use the chaos to expand his territory. He announced he would attack Baron Borden. The butler said he understood, noting Baron Borden was pro-empire after marrying an imperial noble and had made a fortune in trade, and asked what reason he had to invade. Hendrik said he'd create that from scratch. February 18 had arrived. While walking, Ramsay saw the snow finally melting, but the ground was still difficult underfoot, so he needed to go shopping in Hendo because he had used more rye than he expected for the cast research. Danny returned with a loaded cart and said they'd packed all the wooden goods for sale. Ramsay asked if they should head out, and Danny agreed. After a while, they stopped to rest, and Danny asked him where they could sell wooden goods. They couldn't sell to their usual lumber supplier this time. One of them asked Ramsay if he had any leads, and Ramsay said he hadn't thought about it. He said it was best to ask someone who knew the whole town. At the Hendricks residence, Ramsay told the guard he was Ramsay Bartlett and wanted to meet Mr. Anthony. A guard went inside to fetch him, and Danny objected, saying this was Count Hendricks's mansion and they could not just waltz in. Ramsay agreed, said he could not meet the Count, and asked to see the steward. Hendrick's butler Anthony came out to greet Ramsay. Ramsay apologized and said he had something to ask. He asked whether a permit was required to sell alcohol in this town. Anthony said that if he supplied stores, especially to the public, he would need one. When asked if he planned to do business there, Ramsay denied it, saying he was only arranging funds for His Excellency and hoped Anthony could recommend buyers for lumber, wooden goods, and alcohol. Anthony thought Ramsay was a bold little monk. Ramsay knew Anthony's thoughts, and as the court's representative, he understood Anthony could not dismiss him because they did not want rumors that the Count did not value his vassals to spread. Anthony sighed and said that for wooden goods Collins Trading is the place for alcohol, soaps, and tavern supplies, and for Timber Doggy's shop is best. Danny grew bored, and Renzi asked Anthony if he had heard any rumors from the capital. Anthony asked him what he meant by that, and thought he just wanted Ramsay out of there already. Ramsay asked if he hadn't heard and said he would tell him. He told him there appeared to be unsettling movements in the capital over the succession and asked for his opinion. Shirley Stewart Anthony knew about it, he said, and she was taken aback. Realizing that pretending ignorance meant he could not speak carelessly, staying silent when Lord Baron Hendrik summoned him risked the Lord accusing him of promising no action, yet he could not simply report the Count's intentions alone. Realizing he had underestimated Ramsay as a country bumpkin, he wondered how far ahead he had been thinking. He urged Ramsay to hurry and sell those goods. Lord Darrell would speak with him directly and told him to return there promptly. Ramsay waited and said he would be back right away. After leaving the mansion, Danny said it was nerve-wracking and asked for. Ramsay said he was sure about meeting the Baron and told him to watch his guardian's movements at that moment. They reached the Collins Trading Company. When they stepped inside, they saw it was full of people. Danny said the place was bustling, and Ramsay said it was one of the town's top trading companies. Seeing a group talking, he told them Anthony had sent him there. Ashley, a merchant at Collins Trading Company, was surprised when Anthony introduced the visitors and asked if they had business with him. Ramsay confirmed they did, saying he wanted to sell some wooden goods. Ashley inspected the quality of the goods. They said they were not bad at all. He said the total would be 1,200 rubla. Ramsay thought about it, and that was that. When asked if they also dealt in rye, Ashley confirmed that it was the famous Collins Trading Company after all. Ramsay said it was great and asked to trade it for 3 barrels of rye. Danny asked if Ramsay really wanted cash instead. Ramsay replied that rye was the main goal, and it was better to trade directly for what he wanted than lose money on fees. Ashley thought it over, and Ramsay said he was in a bit of a hurry because he had an appointment with Baron Darrell afterward. Ashley couldn't believe him and told him to stop joking, but Ramsay insisted he wasn't lying. He suggested that if his claim was true, he should get 4 barrels of rye, and if it was a lie, just 2. He asked Ashley what he thought, and as a merchant, Ashley decided it was not a bad deal either way and agreed to the bet. Ramsay ordered him to move, and Ashley instructed his workers to watch the cargo. They arrived at Darrell's estate, and Ashley told Ramsay that now was the time to back out if he wanted to. Ramsay approached the gate where the guard acknowledged him and invited him inside, leaving Ashley shocked by this and Danny smiling. As they entered, Anthony met them and told Ramsay he could go on while his companions waited in the room. Ramsay stepped into a dark room and found Baron Hendrik sitting there. "Glad to see Rans," he said. Ramsay greeted him and apologized for his outfit. Darrell said not to worry and invited him to make himself comfortable. Ramsay sat down across from him, and Darrell said he would get straight to the main topic. Confirming Ramsay's suspicion, he He said there were troubling movements in the capital and that he intended to use them to expand his territory, which shocked Ramsay. Though he had planned to use the ball to ask Daryl for help, he announced his intentions openly and sensed trouble brewing. Ramsay sat silent, and Daryl praised him, calling silence golden. He went on to say his target was the Borden Baron into the west and that he had come that day for a reason. He asked Ramsay to create a pretext for his invasion. Ramsay was shocked by the request. He calmed himself and asked the other man what he would get out of it. When Daryl asked, Ramsay said he wanted land and money. Daryl explained the land might be tricky at first, but he could prepare the money. Daryl told Ramsay that if Ramsay succeeded, Daryl would pay him 50,000 rubala. Ramsay added that he wanted to buy your tax exemption. Daryl agreed to 3 years. Ramsay told himself that gaining some financial freedom wouldn't be a big deal. The deal was bad, and by then it was hard to refuse. If he's going to poison the well, go all in. Ramsay asked whether it was merely a pretext, and Daryl confirmed it. Ramsay agreed and said he had another proposal. The scene shifted to Danny, slightly drunk, telling Ramsay that he and Ashley had been talking for a while. Ramsay saw Danny had enjoyed himself, and Danny said they kept bringing wine and dried meat. Ashley came over, apologized to Ramsay for doubting him, and said he would, as promised, arrange 4 barrels of rye and lodging for the night. Ramsay thanked Ashley. Shaking his hand, he said he looked forward to working with Ashley Aston, who knew exactly who he was. On March 2, Paul said it was about. Now is the time to act. Once he and his friends were ready to put their plan into action. He told everyone it was time to move. A friend was excited they were leaving, and Paul said the early bird gets the worm, so they would hit the base under cover of night. Ivan, alarmed, told Paul there was no need to rush, and that last time Ramsay and the others had stolen their crops. Paul said Ramsay's mind changed when he heard they had a stash of liquor, and that alone was a good haul. Ivan realized Paul had suddenly become eager, and that someone had influenced him. A man in a dark hood stood behind them, smiling. Paul told everyone to hurry and get ready. They all listened to him. At night they walked through the bushes, and he said they should talk as they moved. He said Ramsay was holed up in the biggest house and they'd strike there, but they had to stay quiet until then. One of them asked what the plan was. Paul said they would set fires all around, and since it was the middle of the night, would not put them out quickly, letting the smoke take him out. One of them told Paul he could not kill him himself and asked if that was acceptable, and Paul said that as long as Ramsay was gone, that was all that mattered. He said people who pushed themselves too hard tended to die young. The hooded man laughed, called Paul brilliant, and said he seemed to have a talent for leadership. One of Paul's workers asked who the man in the hood was, and Paul realized his workers were meeting him for the first time. Introducing himself as Keith, he said he could not reveal much but was under a noble's command. Paul smiled and said his luck had finally turned. His worker said they would trust him if Paul said so. Just then someone spotted the village and told Paul it was coming into view. Paul told him to extinguish the lights and approach. Paul said they would cover their faces first and kept repeating that. Tell them not to forget to act like bandits. Soon as the night grew quieter, they reached the village and saw Ramsay's house. Someone asked Paul if that was it, and he replied that he had no doubt. He ordered him to light the torches and go all out, and they did, moving forward with the torches. At the house, causing it to catch fire. The house caught fire and Paul laughed, shouting to Ramsay that this was his end. Other villagers came outside and saw that a fire had started. One worker tried to scare the villagers away, saying this was not a show and they should scatter if they wanted to live. Danny and a group of soldiers arrived and asked what they were doing in their village. The workers dismissed them as weaklings. Paul told them to support Tony because he also thought they could beat them. Suddenly, Ramsay emerged in armor with a sword and attacked Paul. Paul managed to block it and was surprised to see Ramsay still alive. Seeing that Ramsay was still alive, he pushed him away. He asked him whether he had found a woman and saved himself. Randy said it was pathetic to think this was what he called a brother, and it made him want to cry. Paul Trash shot back, telling him not to worry, just as he was about to make him cry blood. Smiling, he raised his sword and attacked Ramsay. Ramsay blocked and parried, and they exchanged blows. Archibald's training as a ruler let him hold his own, but the power gap between them was too large. While Paul relaxed, Ramsay struggled and knew that if this kept up he was finished, but he refused to give up. Thank you, then Keith called Paul. Keith told Paul this was the end, and when Paul asked why, Keith told him to look around, where he saw most of his workers get captured. 2 of his friends, Tony and Paul's younger brother Kuhn, were dead. Seeing this shocked him. Danny and the others were still fresh and ready to back up Ramsay. Keith told Paul they were at a disadvantage, asked Paul to let Keith guide him, and said they should regroup and reassess. Reluctantly, Paul agreed and ran off with Keith. Danny tried to chase Paul, but Ramsay held him back, saying it was unnecessary and that fire control came first. Charlie and the other villagers brought water and buckets. Ramsay said if they acted now, they could limit the damage to just the base, and told everyone to join Forge to put out the fire. Keith ran with Paul, who cursed Ramsay. He said he would never forgive him. At Hendrik's mansion, Ramsay was with Danny and Ozma, and they were all well dressed. Darrell arrived and apologized to Ramsay for making him wait. Anthony also welcomed Lord Hans Rugal, who arrived looking sad and distraught. Darrell took a seat. He then asked everyone present whether they should discuss the details. Trancy summarized the recent attack on Bartlett Village. He asked his father, Lord Rughull, whether he had any objections or counter-arguments. Hans looked disappointed and sad. He wondered whether it was really Paul asking Ramsay if he had any evidence. Ramsay, of course, said all the attacks were by 6 residents of Rugal Village, and they were Paul Kuhn, Tony, Ivan, John, and Tom. He said they had captured 3 of them, and if he doubted it, they could bring the prisoners there. Hans asked about the other 3. Ramsay told him that Paul, the mastermind, had fled and left everyone behind. Both of the others, Tony and Kuhn, the Rugal family's second son, were dead. Hans was clearly shocked by that. He pressed his palm to his face to hide his sadness and told everyone he understood. Ramsay told him he would deliver the bodies to his estate later. A smile crossed Darrell's face. He said now was the time for the verdict. He warned Hans Rugal that ignoring earlier warnings and attacking Allied territory was a serious offense. Even if his son did it, a parent still had a duty to supervise. He said he would not kill him, but would strip him of his title and lands and exile him. Hans agreed, and Darrell announced that Lord Ramsay Bartlett would not be blamed for defending his territory, ending the uproar. From the window, Ramsay watched his father leave in utter shame and sadness. Danny sat down and said that standing before the Baron of the Borderlands made him nervous. Ozma agreed. Ramsay then apologized to both of them when I was a child. Mazma asked why the suggestion was so sudden, and Ramsay said he wanted to apologize for not communicating properly earlier, adding that this whole incident. It was a scheme between him and the Baron of the Borderlands. The scene jumps back to when Ramsay met Darrell. Ramsay said he had an idea, explaining that his brother Paul still hadn't given up trying to kill him, so Ramsay offered Darrell his endorsement, and Darrell was intrigued. Ramsay explained that if he spread rumors saying the Baron and Lord Borden disliked him, Paul would take the bait and attack Bartlett's lands. Darrell understood and said that if the Baron pretended to let him escape, the Baron would lead him into a trap and be guilty of aiding the attack, and he told Ramsay it was not a bad idea. He assigned his squire Keith as a messenger, signaled Anthony to do it, and told Ramsay he would give the attack date in advance and that Ramsay needed to focus on defending the village. Back in the present, Ramsay finished explaining, and Danny realized Ramsay had known an attack was coming that day. Ozma said the damage was minimal because they had moved their belongings out beforehand, and Danny added the burned base was already scheduled for reconstruction, so Ramsay agreed but said he had put everyone in danger and was sorry, and Ozma told him there was no need to apologize. He must have decided it was the best course, and in the end they were all safe. Ramsay was pleased to see how much his people trusted him. Darrell came out, told Ramsay he did a good job, and thanked him for his hard work. Then he introduced him to George, who was a general in his Borderlands army. He then told him they would begin preparing for a full-scale invasion, but handed them bags full of rhubarbara first, informing them they had received the promised 50,000 rhubara and advising them to use it wisely. Danny and Ozma were stunned by the amount of money, and Darrell said he had just gotten a message from Keith. Paul appeared to have reached Lord Borden safely, so they should plan their next move. Ramsay said he would first, as agreed, add the formal Rugal territory to Bartlett lands and ask him to confirm it was all right. Darrell said they had to give him a reason to attack from that direction if he believed he had been robbed of land that was rightfully his. Darrell added that knowing Ramsay was on the other side, Paul would not stay silent. He would demand that Lord Borden hand over Paul, and refusal would lead to the use of force. Ramsay asked what would happen if the Baron simply agreed to hand him over, and Darrell winked at Ramsay and said he would make sure the Baron had no choice but to refuse. Darrell would demand a large payment to hide Paul. Ramsay heard this and thought Darrell was shrewd. Now it was March 8. Paul waited at Baron Borden's mansion. At that moment, a maid called Paul to say that Lord Costello had summoned him. Casella de Borden leads the Borden family. After the greeting, Paul knelt to pay his respects, but Casella stopped him. He said there was no need for the small church greeting he'd started using for business. He asked Paul if he remembered the story from the other day. Paul said he did, and added that the Baron was insisting on his protection. It struck him as strange that even Hendrik, the Baron, despised Ramsay. Keith was still absent and could not confirm anything, and Casello confirmed that while offering 200,000 rubara in compensation. He tore up a paper that said Hendrik blamed Lord Paul for initiating the attack and that Paul's father would be held responsible, stripped of his title and exiled. It was announced that Ruval territory would be absorbed into the Bartlett domain. Paul was shocked and furious. Stella went on, saying he had heard from a man named Keith that he had been unjustly cast out because of his brother's rebellion, and that Keith had then protected him in his territory. Cassel asked if he was lying, and Paul said he was not, insisting the Baron was clearly looking for an excuse to invade. Casella supposed that's how it was in thought. He told himself that even if he complied, refusing compensation gave Hendrik every reason to attack, and he would benefit either way. He said he must discuss this with Lord Gardel as well. On March 12, Ramsay told Eric he intended to build a new stronghold to prepare for future attacks. Pointing to the blueprint he had made, he said they would dig up the flatlands to create moats and mounds, put a watchtower on top, and enclose storage and housing behind walls. He told Eric to gather the people of Rugal village and start right away, and Eric said he would do what he could. Danny came over and asked Ramsay if he planned to see his father, and Ramsay agreed. He said he had heard he would be in charge of the estate today. Ramsay caught up with his father Hans on time, and Hans was glad Ramsay had come. He reassured him that he had compiled all the necessary documents in the study and that the villagers had been informed, so he did not need to worry. He said he never imagined Ramsay would succeed, and that it was because he had failed to care for him. Ramsay asked the man what would happen to Ramsay and his mother from now on, and the man said that if Ramsay had no leads they could stay with him, but Hans stopped the man, saying the man had been sentenced to exile, and that if Ramsay did not comply Hans' position would be jeopardized too. He told him they were heading to the capital, and his mother, Helena's brother, was in the palace and might help them find a military position. Ramsay forced a relieved smile. Hans apologized for not treating him properly until now. Despite that, he had only caused trouble. Explaining that Paul had not always been twisted and had cared for Ramsay when he was small, he asked if Ramsay remembered, and Ramsay recalled a happy childhood time when his brother looked after him. Khan admitted it was his fault for expecting too much. He had only hoped he would expand this territory. Having trained him rigorously in both academics and martial arts, he saw the result and accepted responsibility for pushing him too hard. Silence filled the space between them. Hans opened his bag and told Ramsay it was for him, then pulled out a sword and said it had been passed down through their family and that Ramsay should take it. He handed it to him, told him to take care, and called him his son. Ramsay let a tear fall. His bond with his father was weak, and knowing he was a reincarnation and the third son in this country, he felt useless to his father. Ramsay cried. He realized that Hans really was his father. He remembered when his mother held him as he watched them leave. By March 15, Ramsay and the others were digging near their base. The duties of being lord overwhelmed him, and a mountain of concerns filled his mind. He urgently had to finish the mod in Bailey Fort and the moat when someone came up to Ramsay and called him a lord. Johnny, a young man from Henderson, told Ramsay that since Danny was tied up, he was delivering the message. He informed him that a letter from Baron Hendrik of the frontier had arrived for him. Opening the letter, Ramsay saw it was a summons. Taken aback, he told Eric to gather them all. Send the carpenters from Rugal village and finish the fort immediately. He asked Johnny to tell Danny he was heading to Henderson, and Johnny agreed and asked about his escort, but Ramsay said not to worry. After the fort was finished, they would bring in weapons, armor, and food, and Johnny was told to handle his arrangements, which he agreed to. Night had fallen and Ramsay reached the Hendrik residence, out of breath. Ramsay told the guard he had rushed over, but it was already late. The guard smiled, said they had been waiting for him, and asked him to step inside where a maid would guide him. Ramsay, in a nice suit, dropped his belongings and followed the mate to Darrell's private room. Entering the room, he apologized for the wait. Darrell introduced Ramsay to the other men in the room, then introduced those men to Ramsay. Gilbert was the flashy man, the heir of this Count Berkeley. The other man, sweating heavily, was Oliver, the heir of Baron Lloyd. Ramsay shook their hands and said it was nice to meet them. They agreed, and Daryl said they had been friends since childhood and would lend him their strength again. Gilbert called it a toxic bond. That was why Daryl always dragged them into his messes. Oliver agreed that Daryl's reckless demands were exhausting. Daryl stopped the small talk and said they should return to the main topic. He showed them a letter written by Baron Borden. Picking it up, Gilbert read what was inside. The document states that Paul, the firstborn, is the rightful heir to the Rugal territory, and that the third son, Ramsay, must promptly return everything to him, otherwise they will send the entire army to reclaim it. Ramsay called it a declaration of war and shameless greed. He said that with such deep disagreement, they had to fight to settle it. Declaring war made it clear that Earl Gardel supported Baron Bordeaux. Everyone said that Earl Gardel was one of the country's top military families, and Gilbert said they should brace for significant damage on their end. However, Daryl said the army's claim was a blatant lie. Ramsay stayed silent as Daryl explained that if Bartlett's territory were attacked by the entire army, they would be finished, and if the Baron's land were left completely unguarded, the frontier army would target it. Oliver said that meant they would attack with 300 troops, and Hendrik said that was about right, while Ramsay thought even 300 would be a nightmare if they attacked, since that was almost the same number as their own citizens. Gilbert said Baron Borden had at most about 500 troops, so if he used 300 of them, his own territory would be left almost empty. Oliver agreed and said they would lure them into the Baron's territory and ambush them with Gardel's troops at once. Gilbert understood their plan, and Daryl warned that if Earl Gardel could raise 2,000 troops and keep 500 at home, 1,500 would be hidden on the Baron's land, so underestimating the enemy forces could lead to complete annihilation. Ramsay remained silent, listening to the conversation. Oliver said that, depending on battlefield conditions, they would need 3 times the force to take a castle or fort. Gilbert asked Daryl how many troops they could move. He told him he had 2,000, Oliver had 400, Jill had 300, and Ramsay had. Before he could finish, he stopped and said they should not expect much from their force. Ramsay felt embarrassed. Jill said that made a total of 2,700, and then a siege would follow. They kept talking, and Ramsay realized it had been over an hour, and the discussion was going in circles. Knowing he could not speak on military strategy, he still wondered whether he should just sit there while caught in the middle of the conflict. When he spoke up, everyone noticed. Daryl asked him what was the matter. If they got stuck, he told them to go back to the premise of their discussion. That meant Daryl and Baron Borden had stepped into the succession fight between him and Paul, and each side was secretly trying to seize the other's territory. After confirming that, Ramsay asked everyone who they thought would make the first move in the battle. He tried to answer but could not. Ramsay explained that the person who took the initiative this time would be put in a tough spot. He said the conflict was about succession, so Bartlett's territory would be the first target. If Paul launched an invasion, the Borderlords could respond with the full force of their army. Conversely, if they attacked the Baron's territory, Bartlett's lands and the Borderlords would be left vulnerable to raids. Both Gil and Oliver agree with this. Ramsay said they should make their move. This left everyone confused. Gil asked if he hadn't just said they were putting themselves at a disadvantage, and Ramsay said he had a plan. Have Daryl lead all the troops he could muster, and if he did that his lands would be wide open, so I would like to request just 50 soldiers from him, and then he would find a way to turn the tide in Bartlett's territory. He'll ask Daryl what he would do, and after thinking for a moment, Daryl smiled and told Ramsay he agreed. He said he would pay for mercenaries and put them under Ramsay's command, making Ramsay responsible for whatever happened, and Ramsay agreed. Oliver suggested they use it as their base plan and map out a strategy. Their discussion continued. On the 30th of March, at Baron Borden's mansion, a guard named Paul said Lord Costello had requested his presence. Paul was excited to hear this. Open the door to reveal the code. Stella speaks with Ludwig von Gardel, head of House Gardel. Costello said the young border lord was leading about 3,000 troops toward them, so he had mobilized almost his entire army. Costello told Paul he was entrusting him with 200 soldiers, so Paul could go stabilize Costello's territory. Paul agreed, and Costello said he would assign an aide and that Paul should make good use of her. Paul thanked him and promised to be of service. He dismissed everyone, and Paul left at once. After putting on the gear, Paul smiled and said at last, now it was time to deliver judgment to Ramsay. At that moment he left the mansion. Captain Veronica of Baron Borden's army greeted him and said she had been waiting. She had been appointed to assist this unit. Paul introduced himself and urged everyone to get ready for battle. Veronica agreed. She ordered all troops to be ready. She told Paul they should be ready to leave in about 30 minutes and asked which route to take, recommending the detour, but Paul refused. He warned the northern route risked running into Hendrik's border force, and the southern route crossed Lord Dominic's territory and could cause misunderstandings with him, so although it would take longer and carry risks, the mountain route would be better. Veronica thought it was a fair point, but since the unit had many older soldiers, she preferred a flat route to a rugged mountain path. She told Paul she understood, and that they would take the mountain route but follow a relatively gentle path. Paul agreed and was keen to show Ramsay. Back in Bartlett's territory, Ramsay had finished getting the improvised setup running. He filled water from the nearby stream, built the food storage with earth walls to resist fire, and stocked plenty of food. A man then came to Ramsay, called him chief, and said they were all set over there. Hawk led the mercenary group, Black Eagles. Ramsay thanked him and asked how coordination with Danny was going, and Hawk said there were no problems for now, and that he would bring Danny and the others under their Black Eagle banner. He said that under normal circumstances, integrating the mercenary group into the regular army would make sense, but the regulars were a hastily assembled force, so entrusting his men's lives was out of the question. Ramsay agreed, saying that relying on experienced mercenaries to lead was the best bet. But he warned against wasting regular troops. Hawk laughed and told Ramsay to tell that to the enemy force. At that moment, Johnny arrived and told Ramsay the weapons were ready to go. Ramsay asked Johnny how many arrows they had, and Johnny said about 200, Ramsay news. They weren't enough, so they told Johnny to hold on a second. He told Hawk he wanted to stock up on arrows, have the soldiers gather branches for reconnaissance, and asked for his permission. Hawk said it was fine with him. Ramsay thanked him and said he would go give some orders. He watched him with interest, noting Ramsay was young but a lord, and had checked with him before moving the troops, and knowing that was one thing but actually doing it was another. Smiling, he said he could really get some work done here. On March 31 in the United States, a messenger rushed into the village shouting and woke everyone. Hawk asked what was going on, and the messenger said he'd spotted about 200 enemy troops halfway up the Beverly Mountains. Hawk felt disappointed because he had heard they would be facing 300. He insisted it would be a breeze, and Ramsay warned that losing through carelessness was no laughing matter. Danny asked the messenger how much longer until they engaged. The messenger said the enemy troop was resting too, so they would be seen in as little as 1 hour and no later than 3. Danny told the messenger to fall back and rest. He was always worried. Just then I was kicked in the side by a hawk. Someone told him that if he stayed this tense now, he would not last until the real thing. Counting on him, he ordered the soldiers to prepare and called his surgeon. Danny obeyed and left. Ramsay asked Hawk what he thought and whether they stood a chance. Hawk said they should be fine in numbers. They would not know until they tried. Ramsay said his uncertainty felt oddly reassuring. Danny returned and told Hawk he had ordered the troops to get ready for deployment. Hawk said they should run a final check. He announced he would take overall command. Danny had 20 regular troops and Ramsay led 10. He said he would command the remaining 50 mercenaries they brought and told them to follow the overall orders, leaving the rest to their judgment. Ramsay said that no matter how many times he heard it, the plan remained very vague, and Hawk told them not to worry because that fork could hold off the enemy with just the mercenaries, and he was sure they would not pull any dumb stunts. He said they should get started on this. Paul and his group arrived. He was surprised to see a fortress built so quickly. Veronica told him the fortress bridge was already raised, so to breach it they'd have to build another bridge or cross the moat. Paul asked what they should do. Veronica said she had heard there were no seasoned soldiers there, so they might try, and it seemed their reinforcements had not arrived, so Paul agreed and said they would advance as planned. As they marched forward, Paul stopped them and told them to form up from that position. An arrow zipped past Paul's face. An arrow had barely missed him. Shocked, he ordered his troop to fall back a bit and move away from the fortress. It made him wonder why arrows could reach them from that distance. He looked up at the giant tower and wondered if it was the reason. Ramsay stood at the top of the tower with an archer, smiling as he said the range was more than enough. From high ground arrows flew farther, but only 3 people could reach that height and accuracy dropped, so a barrage of projectiles was enough. Addressing the troops below, he said this was their chance. This left Paul deeply frustrated. They said Ramsay was mocking them, and Veronica tried to calm him. He ordered his troops to charge forward and take Ramsay's head. The archers kept their arrows ready as Hawk told them to wait until they were close enough to fire. A few moments later, he ordered them. A rain of arrows fell on the soldiers. Danny ordered them to keep firing and not let them get close to the fortress. Hawk asked Danny where Ramsay was, and Danny said they were guarding against ambushes from the rear and inside. Hawk praised him as crafty. Soldiers were dying everywhere. Veronica told Paul they would be wiped out like this and needed to retreat. Paul had no choice but to listen to her, so he commanded his soldiers to fall back. Retreating into the forest, Veronica told him that during the first battle they had lost 50 men in total, so they did not have enough troops to surround the fortress. Paul asked if she had any good plan. She suggested a night raid as the classic move, and Paul asked if she truly thought it would work. After a moment's thought, she said it would. She recommended they retreat for now because their information on Bartlett's territory was wrong, and taking that fortress with their current force was nearly impossible. Paul agreed, considered ignoring the fortress to attack the village, but then realized the village and the Rugal territory were his, so plundering them would make no sense. Paul said he needed at least one night to think it over. At night, Veronica was woken by a sudden noise when Hawk and his mercenaries arrived, telling the soldiers their judgments were too soft and challenging their belief that a night raid would not come. Veronica told the troops to stay calm because they had the numbers and should stick together. After hearing that, Hawk said staying together would put them at a disadvantage, so he told his mercenaries to stir things up and then fall back. Back at the camp, Hawk returned, and Ramsay praised him, then asked what they had seen from the enemy camp. Hawk warned him their morale was sinking, and they would soon fall apart. Ramsay told Hawk to tell the soldiers to take a nap. Just as they were about to make a morning charge, Danny came in and asked if it was necessary. Ramsay, his face expressionless, said that if they were going to do this, they had to hit them hard. Danny felt anxious, while Hawk stayed nonchalant. Ramsay knew he had to settle his grudge with Paul here, and his growing decisiveness was starting to overwhelm Paul. Hawk said he understood Danny's concerns, but reckless moves could have caused heavy losses then, though they would likely retreat soon. They should have given them a good whack on the way out. He planned for his squad and Ramsay's to pursue them, while Danny defended the fort. On the morning of April 2, a messenger arrived at Ramsay and told him the enemy was preparing to retreat. Hawk ordered his soldiers to get ready for a charge, asked if they had rested well, and they said yes. He told Danny he was coming too because the Lord's squad was likely nearby, adding they'd take them out before splitting up, and Danny agreed. They gathered the soldiers and marched forward. At last, Hawk spotted them and said it looked like about 30 were left. Brave and confident, Veronica stood alongside her fellow soldiers. Hawk ordered Danny, Ramsay, and the other soldiers to show no mercy, cut the enemy down without hesitation, and focus only on the enemy in front of them. He ordered a charge, and they rushed forward. Frightening Veronica's force, Hawk ordered them to surrender and promised to spare their lives, adding that anyone who did not want to die should drop their weapons. Many of Veronica's soldiers surrendered and begged Hawk to spare their lives, leaving Veronica stunned. Hawk said they were in the clear and told Ramsay they were moving forward. Ramsay said his squad would arrive soon. Turning, he saw Veronica still holding her ground, warning the soldiers to stay back and saying she would fight to the end. Ramsay recognized her, told the soldiers to fall back, introduced himself to Veronica as the army's commander, and said he could see she was a renowned commander. Veronica said she was the captain of Baron Borden's force and asked to speak with him. Rans apologized, saying he could not accept a one-on-one duel and would have preferred that she surrender quietly, promising to guarantee her safety. Ramsay thought she still stood her ground. She was a troublesome opponent, and they might have escaped with Paul if things had gone differently. He told Danny they were switching roles and would protect the fort, so Danny should go support Hawk. Danny got it. He gathered his squad to pursue Hawk. Ramsay said he could spend time with her, but asked her to pause and look around. Only defeated soldiers and corpses remained. He told her she had no chance against him. Veronica reluctantly agreed to surrender. When Danny Squire caught up to Hawk, he saw that Hawk had finished fighting. Hawk told him the enemy commander had escaped, and there was nothing they could do now. In that battle, Paul's force, commanded by Baron Borden, was routed, including. Counting the dead among the fleeing, they were down to 20 soldiers. Paul himself had barely escaped to the Baron capital. In Boston, the first battle ended with a decisive victory for Bartlett's army. On the border between Baron Borden's territory and Count Hendrik's land. Mounted on a horse with soldiers beside him, Gilbert told his men to take care of themselves and to keep the stalemate for the time being. He remembered Darrell saying it, but after 3 days of indecision, he wondered if everything was really okay. A soldier approached and told Gilbert that a messenger from the Bartlett territory had just arrived. Gilbert said he would stop by to see Darrell. Entering the tent, he found Darrell and Oliver and asked what was going on in Bartlett. Oliver said it was nice to see him. Darrell relayed the messenger's report that Ramsay and his crew had won a decisive victory. Gilbert was pleased and said Ramsay had real guts. He asked what the next move was, and Oliver said he'd been pinning down the Baron's troops there to keep reinforcements from coming in. Darrell suddenly laughed loudly, puzzling Oliver and Gilbert. He said the status quo as it stood would shock Gilbert. He explained they would keep attacking just enough to pin the enemy down without having to take the fort. The scene shifted to Ramsay, who lifted his cup and called for a toast to their victory. They all raised their cups and cheered to celebrate their victory. Danny approached Ramsay and asked what they were going to do next. Ramsay told him everything depended on Hawk, who was drunk and joked that he was the chosen one. Ramsay asked him about the future, how the Black Eagle Corps was doing, and whether they were still good to go, and Hawk said they were and that he would keep raking it in. Ramsay smiled and said he wanted to ask for the next job right away, shocking Hawk. After a while, he walked up to Veronica, her hands bound and restrained, and asked if she was all right and, screaming at him, she said if he was going to kill her, he should just get it over with. Ramsay told her to relax, saying he did not plan to kill her yet, and asked if she had said she was a captain, and whether she was an ability or an emergent. Veronica ignored him and said that if he wasn't going to kill her, he might as well take her captive and do as he pleased. Ramsay saw she wasn't listening to a word he said. He figured he only had to wait until she calmed down. Just as he was leaving, he heard her stomach growl. Ask whether they could negotiate. After a while, he untied her and gave her something to eat. He asked her to tell him about herself. Veronica introduced herself, saying she was 20 and a captain under Baron Borden, and that she had been born in Warden territory to the head of the Mossman Trading Company and his concubine. Ramsay learned she came from a good family and told her he would demand a ransom from Baron Borden so she could be free as a bird. With a sad smile, Veronica said the Baron would not pay a ransom, and her father Mossman would not either. Most preferred to spend money on goods rather than pay for her. Ramsay saw this would complicate matters, since keeping her captive would be expensive. Veronica told him she was trained as a soldier and suggested he could sell her to a slave trader. When one woman asked another if she wanted to be a slave, the other woman got angry and told him it was ridiculous, saying no one would want to be a slave. Then he asked what she wanted to do. Nearly in tears at the question, she said she just wanted to go home. Nodding, Ramsay said it made sense and stood up. Offering to do everything he could to get her back home, he surprised Veronica with his kindness. The scene moved to a meeting between Mossman, head of the Mossman Trading Company, and Costello, where Mossman said they were in a bad spot, and asked whether it was Lord Paul of the Marcus family, the man who had lost badly and fled in disgrace, and Costello praised him for his keen ear. Losing 200 soldiers was a catastrophic blunder. He told him Paul was under house arrest there. Mossman said Count Gardel had reinforced with 1,500 troops, so no amount of gold would be enough. Cassel met his gaze more easily. Mossman asked what had brought him that day, and Costello pulled out a letter, saying a swift horse had just arrived with a request from General Holland at Fort Code. The report said Veronica and 20 others were captured in Bartlett territory, and a ransom had to be paid to secure their release. Mossman said he would live to see Lord Costello pay up, and Costello apologized, saying he had no money to give, and that because of Paul he now had to pay condolence money to 180 soldiers' families. They stared at each other intently. The Muslim said abandoning the captives would make him look bad as a lord. Casella said it was no concern, since they could pretend they knew nothing, so he had assigned the military's disgrace to this task. Veronica was different, having earned her place through hard work rather than family ties, and he was not sure he could afford Mossman's daughter's ransom. Mossman said they had no option but to give up. This surprised Casella. When asked if he was saying he would not cover the ransom, Mossman said his trading company had already lent so much and his own pockets were threadbare. Casella kept telling himself that, to Mossman, she was just a bastard child. At that moment, a soldier burst through the door. Casella told him they had guests and asked what was happening. The soldier said it was an urgent message and that the village of Ease on the east side was under attack. Casella was shocked and asked if the Borderlord's army had moved. The soldier denied it and told him the enemy was Bartlett's army. Casella could not believe it. Hawk led Bartlett's army and ordered the soldiers to burn the village, seize everything, ignore fleeing villagers, and loot as much as they could. Ramsay said the village at the foot of the Beverly Mountains belonged to the Baron, so he wanted Hawk and the others to strike it first. Hawk told the others that once they grabbed food and valuables they would skedaddle, so no dawdling, and when he saw Danny looking worried he comforted him. He warned him to watch closely because this was war. He told him that normally he would bring the villagers back, especially the young women and children, but not this time, saying it was not out of mercy but that they would be a burden. He asked Danny if he understood, and Danny said he did. He slapped his face to steady his focus and told the soldiers it was time to pull out. Hawk knew it would be hard on Danny, but Danny needed to be ready to lead troops, and Hawk was glad at least the first battle was not a total loss. The scene shifted to General Holland, Baron Borden's army commander, who was angry after a messenger said Borden wanted him to pull troops from the front, said that was impossible and demanded to know what Borden was thinking. He said their troops were exhausted after the relentless assaults and still had no idea what the border lords intended. The messenger warned that at this rate, the enemy from the east would ravage their lands. When Holland asked the messenger how many troops were needed, the messenger said about 300. Holland thought that was not a catastrophic number, but anything could happen. Holland agreed to send 200 soldiers. The messenger said he understood his position, but urgently requested their dispatch. Holland grew frustrated and wondered what Count Hendrik was planning. The scene moved to Gilbert and Darrell. When Jill asked him how long he planned to keep the stalemate going, Darrell told him to stop saying ridiculous stuff and promised he would keep it until they won, obviously. Gilbert got angry about it and said he wanted to know if they could actually win, and Oliver tried to calm him down. Darrell asked what he thought. Oliver said there was no need to panic yet. The longer this went on, the more it would cost, so they had to be careful with their supplies. Darrell said he had stocked up just in case, when a soldier stepped into their tent and whispered in his ear. Darrell said after he finished things were progressing better than expected. He told him to prepare for a full-scale attack. In Bartlett territory, a messenger told Ramsay that Darrell had ordered them to reduce the enemy troops at that pace. Ramsay told Hawk and Danny that the Count still wanted to ravage the village. Someone made a hot call to Darrell Greedy, while Danny looked unsure. Randy said this time it would not go so smoothly because a defensive force would be dispatched. They had already taken the nearest village, Asa, so he suggested targeting Mocha, Pina, or Toto, saying the enemy would expect attacks on nearby villages. Danny asked where they should strike, since they could not crush them all at once. Ramsay considered how to trick the enemy and suggested they deliberately attack the capital, Boston. Danny was shocked and Hawk laughed, calling it an interesting idea but impractical because it would cause them severe losses. Hawk suggested I go to the second largest city. Danny said he'd heard it was the barony's commercial hub and a place that would be hard to hit, and asked whether it would be dangerous. Hawk said they'd cause a ruckus there and then attack Gauze village. Veronica confronted them. Confused, they asked her what had happened. She told them to at least discuss strategy in another room and made clear she was not to be underestimated. Ramsay laughed, apologized, and said the fortress could not afford any leeway. He asked what she thought about the Baron's troop movements. Veronica smirked and asked if he expected an enemy soldier to answer that. Ramsay said there was still no word from the enemy base. Veronica looked sad and disappointed. After leaving the room, Ramsay told Danny they should finalize the plan and execute it that night, and Danny asked that they not rush, and Ramsay agreed. He said he thought this would settle things. The Black Raven Brigade's elite unit staged a diversion. 200 reinforcements from the Baron's army moved in to stop them. Meanwhile, Erlit's main force struck Gauze village on the far side. Count Hendrik's forge then began their full-scale assault, fully prepared. Cassel asked his minister whether that was the current state of the battle. He said he could not request more troops from the front lines. The minister said the situation was difficult because the enemy could launch a full-scale attack during troop rotations, and although they had been holding their ground, they were gradually losing it. Hestella considered asking Count Gardel for reinforcements, but quickly dismissed it because any help would take too long to arrive while the village burned. He instructed his minister to send a peace envoy to Count Hendrik. On April 5 at Fort Code in Holland, Darrell and Ramsay met Costello as peace negotiations began among the four parties. Renzi noticed Baron Borden and, beside him, General Holland, the respected representative of Count Gardel. Then he saw soldiers restraining Paul. Borden spoke first and apologized for the conflict, saying he was truly sorry and that they were as well. Paul had nestled it. With a smile, Darrell said he could only imagine the turmoil in his heart, but that did not concern them. He told them the fact was that they had repeatedly ignored their requests and mobilized their forces. Warden asked him what he meant by that. Darrell said he wanted to recognize the Gorda Plain as part of his border lord's territory. Regarding compensation, 200,000 rubella sounded fair, but Holland stopped him. He repeated that the war started from a misunderstanding and asked whether gathering evidence and confronting Baron Borden could have prevented it. Ramsay admitted Holland had a point, and the border lord had deliberately held back from military action. He said Lord Rugal was his vassal, so his son should have been handed over without delay, and those who had neglected their duties had no right to dictate terms, and Holland said that if responsibility was being discussed, Hendrik, the border lord, should also be blamed for mismanaging his vassal, and asked how Hendrik planned to take responsibility. Ramsay realized they had reached an impasse and asked Baron Borden what compensation he thought was fair. The warden said 50,000 rubella, as compensation seemed reasonable. Darrell grew angry, stood up, and said the negotiations had broken down. Ordering his guard to send a swift horse to Gilbert at the front lines, he commanded the entire army to charge immediately. Holland stalked him. Holland thought renewing the battle under these conditions was absurd, since without enough troops and competent commanders the fort would fall. He wondered if only the Baron had paid attention to both military and financial matters. Holland told Darrell he understood. He said they should settle this during the Gorda Plain session. Orden flinched in shock, and Darrell said that a loan was enough. Holland offered $50,000 rubella as compensation. Darrell cut his demand down to $150,000, but Holland agreed to a clean $100,000. He asked Darrell to wrap this up for both sides. Darrell agreed and asked whether Baron Borden was satisfied. Borden agreed and Holland smiled. Someone urged them to sign the treaty and call a ceasefire, but Ramsay told them to wait a moment. He said he wasn't finished negotiating yet, and everyone was stunned. Darrell laughed as Holland called him a little brat. They said he was not welcome there, and Ramsay found that amusing. It was as if this war had started from a misunderstanding. The Nat made him out to be the first attacked, the greatest victim, yet he said he had not been invited to the negotiating table. Holland was speechless. Ramsay asked how he planned to make amends for that. After a brief pause, Holland said he would hand Paul over as the root cause of all this, and they would settle this peacefully. Ramsay and Paul exchanged a look. Ramsay told him he didn't need that. It stunned both Holland and Borden. He told himself he was not a warrior but a lord, so he favored practical benefits over honor, and since Paul's capture meant nothing to his people, he could not accept the offer. The warden said that proof Paul had ravaged their lands was not enough, and Ramsay explained it had been done by mercenaries hired by the Baron of the Border, so unfortunately he would not receive a single rubella for it. Ramsay realized it was half a lie. The shares with Hawk's Black Caring Group were settled before the conflict started. He knew there was no need to be brutally honest about it here. Borden told Ramsay he could take the Beverly Mountains in full, and that would be enough. Ramsay asked for the foothills as well, but Borden refused, saying only the mountains. Finding it a fair compromise, Ramsay told them that if they gave him a written agreement saying they would not be held responsible for landslides or anything like that, they were bored and agreed. Ramsay raised the ransom for the captured Captain Veronica and her 20 subordinates, but it was dismissed curtly, with someone saying it was fine if the captive was not returned, and Ramsay was shocked, and that was the end of it. They told him they all wanted to return, and said the captain was indispensable to his force. The board said paying the reparations all at once was impossible, so they could not pay the ransom. Ramsay realized he had no support from Veronica's father or the Muslim trading company. Sighing, Holland said that since they had reached an agreement, they should sign a ceasefire. Darrell and Borden signed a document and then shook hands. Darrell told Ramsay he would return to the front and told him to take back command of his territory. Ramsay agreed. Holland asked Costello what would happen to Paul, and Costello told him to dispose of him. Ramsay glanced back at his brother and said goodbye in his head. Paul bit his lip as he accepted his defeat. That day, only one abandoned body remained on the Gorda Plains. Back in Bartlett's territory, Danny greeted him with a happy welcome and said they had done it. Ramsay said he had not said anything, but when Danny asked if the war was over, he replied yes. Danny left to report their victory to everyone. Hawk arrived and asked about the ceasefire terms. Ramsay said the Baron gave up the Gorda Plains and paid 100,000 rubella, but only received the Beverly Mountains. Hawks agreed it sounded right and handed him the list of spoils. After reading for a while, Ramsay said he would take the food, textiles, some ironware, and any other valuable items Hawk could take. Hawk called him a reasonable commander and said that would work for him. Leaving, he said he would take care of it right away and told him the lady was waiting for him in his room. Ramsay entered his room and found Veronica waiting, clearly excited to see him. Seeing his face, she realized it hadn't worked out for her and said it was fine because she had expected it. Lying on the cot, she told him he could kill or sell her, or use her body instead. Ramsay looked at her and asked if she wasn't considering joining him. Veronica was surprised. Ramsay said he could not bear to sell her and wanted her to serve as his vassal. Veronica refused, saying her subordinates were there and she could not save herself by sacrificing them. Ramsay smiled and gave her two choices: refuse and he would sell everyone to the slivers, or work there, and he promised to release the other captives. Veronica looked at him, clearly moved. Veronica bowed before him, gave her name, and pledged her loyalty to Sir Bartlett. Ramsay drew his sword and tapped her shoulder to mark her appointment. Another, previously judged useless, had joined the ranks. He celebrated his victory with others at a party. Ramsay arrived and found everyone enjoying themselves. Eric invited him to join them, but Ramsay declined and said he would catch up later. A few days had passed since the peace talks at the Goda Plains. With the crisis over, the territory celebrated, and despite Paul's poor reputation as the Rugal heir, the merger with the Bartlett territory was going smoothly. Willie and Cassie brought a barrel of cast and kept telling everyone it was a treat from the Lord, so whenever anyone wanted some, they presented the barrel as a gift from the Lord. Thank you very much. They should line up. Many people did, and Ramsay was pleased to see it, thinking to himself that they had won and kept their smiles. His hand still shook. This was his first battle. The fighting was scarier than he expected, a world he could not imagine from his peaceful past life, but he had to keep fighting to protect this territory. That was his duty as the Lord. Just then Johnny arrived, visibly drunk. Johnny told Ramsay he was truly grateful for the cast. Ramsay replied it was all due to his efforts, and Johnny said he would keep doing his best. Ramsay told him to enjoy himself, while Johnny asked if he would get drunk, and Ramsay declined, saying a mountain of tasks lay ahead. Back in his office he saw the tasks. Inspect the mountain land he had acquired, but leave that to Rogers and the logging crew. Start planting crops soon because securing a stubble food supply was a challenge. Build a large granary and train the soldiers for the future. At that moment, Danny came over and asked if he was still working on a day like that. Danny offered Rans a drink, saying it was a victory celebration and he should join them for a drink. Ramsay nodded and took a drink. Danny felt relieved they'd made it through. Ramsay agreed. They said they really had, and he owed a lot to Danny. Danny told him to stop and said they were almost there. They both looked out the window and saw all the citizens were happy. He admitted it had been tough, but he was glad they had fought. Ramsay agreed and Danny left, telling Ramsay to stop by later. Ramsay was glad Danny had come to check on him. Looking out the window, he saw two children singing and waving at him. He said they would do their best to protect that view for the future. On April 21, Ramsay was about to leave and planned to ask Veronica if she was ready. She told him they had moved 6 barrels of cash and her men were ready for a skirt. Ramsay thanked her, and she asked if that was all they were taking to Hendo's. Ramsay dismissed that, saying they should greet Daryl first. Ramsay reached Hendrik's mansion. Daryl greeted him. Ramsay congratulated him on the victory. Daryl said it was all thanks to his effort, and Ramsay replied he was being too kind. He told Daryl he must leave because he had matters to attend to. As he was about to leave, Daryl called and asked him to come back that night, which confused Ramsay. Outside, Veronica greeted him when they met. Leaving the mansion, Veronica saw a crowd outside and said the border lord's estate was packed, and Ramsay explained that after winning the war and expanding their territories, many merchants and nobles were now eager to curry favor, and he added that he'd been asked to drop by earlier and wondered if she knew why, and she said she couldn't say. They arrived at Collins Trading Company, and Ashley acknowledged him. Ramsay called him rude, and Ashley apologized and asked what was going on that day. Ramsay said he believed he could win him over with the wine they had made in their territory. Ashley picked up the bottle and tasted the wine. He asked Ramsay how much the wine could sell for. Ramsay estimated 3 to 5 rubella. Ashley said he thought it was worth about 3 rubella, so their buying price was 1 rubella per cup. Noticing Ramsay had brought it in a large barrel, he said they could add some color and sell each barrel for 2,000. Ramsay said they didn't need to turn it into cash like last time and asked if a loom was among the livestock, and Ashley said they had everything, listing the loom at 3,000 rubella, goats at 4,000, and chickens at 3,000. Randy suggested trading a pair of chickens and a loom for 4 barrels of wine. He thought asking for a 1,000 rubella discount was a bit much. Ashley asked about the other 2 barrels, which surprised Ramsay, and said that if Ramsay planned to sell them, she would give him one loom and one rooster with 2 hands so he could buy all 6. Ramsay agreed it was the same amount, then asked why. Ashley said this quarter's sales figures looked troubling. Ramsay agreed to the deal and said the price was fine. Ashley was happy, said it would help them, and left to make the arrangements right away. Veronica came over and whispered in Ramsay's ear, startling him. Ramsay asked her not to whisper like that, and she apologized. She asked him if that was okay, and said she could have gotten better terms if she had negotiated better. Ramsay conceded that might be true, but he'd likely rely on Colin's trading company in the future, so it was a give and take. Veronica agreed, saying connections with merchants were important. Ashley arrived, apologized for keeping them waiting, and said he would have the arrangements ready by tomorrow morning and would prepare some young, lively chickens. He told him to stop by before he headed home. After they left, Ashley waved goodbye. Veronica was told the soldiers who came with them would get a free night, and she said she would go with him because she was his bodyguard. Ramsay noticed how her attitude had changed since she was a prisoner. He asked her if they should return to the border lord's estate, hoping they would not make unreasonable demands of him. He reached the mansion and found it crowded with people. Ramsay and Veronica both felt scared when he realized it was a victory party, and he wondered what the border lord was thinking by inviting someone like him to such an event. I saw high society people talking among themselves. At that moment, Daryl arrived, said it was good to see him, and told him to take his time and enjoy. Uncomfortable, Veronica told Ramsay she wasn't used to places like that. Ramsay shoved a hot dog into her mouth. He told her he couldn't read Daryl's intentions, but since it was a party, they shouldn't worry about the surroundings and should enjoy the delicious food. They enjoyed the food, and then an announcement said Daryl would speak, so he took the stage, thanked everyone for coming to support someone as inexperienced as he was, and said he owed that victory to them and his outstanding comrades. He said he wanted to express his gratitude to them. First, he mentioned Gilbert of the Berkeley family, saying Gilbert had fought bravely on the front lines and taken down many enemy soldiers, and then thanked Oliver of the Loy family for handling logistics and managing rear supplies. Finally, he mentioned Ramsay Bartlett claimed he was the true hero of that victory. The sudden mention of his name startled Ramsay. Daryl said Ramsay had provided a vetted overview of the entire battle, and without him, they would never have secured the Gorda plan. Awkwardly, Ramsay sat as Daryl urged everyone to give him the highest praise. Gilbert and Oliver laughed, while Veronica clapped cutely for him. He asked the 3 to step onto the stage. They did, and Ramsay was nervous about speaking. Gilbert gave a good speech, and when the others finished they asked Ramsay to come up last. Determined to avoid a scene, Ramsay told himself to finish quickly and stay as forgettable as possible. He began his speech and introduced himself as Ramsay Bartlett. He credited Duke Hendrik and the Lords Gilbert and Oliver with the victory, apologized for his shortcomings, and said he would work to sharpen his skills further to help Daryl. After the speech, he became exhausted and fell ill. Veronica noticed and told the maid her lord was unwell and that she wanted to help, so she asked for a room and the maid gave them a private one. Ramsay sighed heavily and said he was in a dilemma, and Veronica, confused, said it should be good that Duke Hendrik and the other nobles acknowledged him. Rand said that at that moment, the royal family was split between the Duke of Agnes's faction and Prince Emel's, and the Duke supported the Baron. In short, he was forced to publicly back Baron Hendrik, and by extension, the Duke's faction, though he said he never intended to side with either faction. Realizing it could not be undone, he decided to build ties with the Princess faction to maintain the balance. He left the mansion early in the morning. Anthony asked if he was leaving that early, and Ramsay confirmed it and thanked him for letting him stay the night. He asked him to pass his regards to Daryl. Anthony said he understood and invited him to visit any time. He was an invaluable companion to them, and Ramsay awkwardly thanked him. As they left, Ashley greeted them, asked if he was ready, and told him to take it back right away. Ramsay agreed, saying the place was scary and he wanted to go home. Ashley realized they were talking about the previous day's victory party, said his lord had been there too, and noted everyone was buzzing about Ramsay. The townspeople knew Ramsay was his guest and were already on edge. Ramsay saw word about him spreading through town. Ashley prepared a cart with everything that was promised and discussed. Ramsay decided to develop the territory as much as possible before they ran into any more trouble, and he asked Veronica for her ideas on how to increase the village population. After thinking, she said they should encourage marriage or buy sleeves. Ramsay realized it came down to making money. On April 30, Danny and Eric were excited to watch Ramsay create a new dream. Ramsay said he wanted them both to try it. Eric asked whether it was different from being fast. Ramsay said he was planning to make a stronger drink than K-Fast, so he decided to have them try it first. Eric and Danny drank the glass they were given and felt a strong twinge, and when they asked what it was, Ramsay said the drink was 10 times stronger than Class, so they said he should have warned them first. Eric said the drink was incredible, and Danny said it was his first time trying it and asked what kind of drink it was. Ramsay said it was called whiskey, made from processed, fermented rye and then distilled to extract the alcohol. Danny realized that explained why Ramsay had been buying copper and glassware in town recently. Rightly, Ramsay asked how it tasted, and he said it was delicious. Eric tried to get one more glass. Ramsay kicked them both out. They banged on the door, saying they only wanted a sip. Ramsay realized the problem was the amount because he had not even extracted one part in 120 of the mash he had prepared, and so needed a more efficient distillation method. At that moment, Veronica pushed past Eric and Danny and told Ramsay that a messenger from Baron Hendrik had arrived. The messenger looked at Ramsay and asked if he was Lord Bartlett, and Ramsay confirmed he was. At this, the messenger thrust a letter at him, saying it was a message from Count Hendrik's office and telling him to read it. After the messenger left, Veronica said he was very rude because he hadn't even dismounted his horse. Ramsay said maybe he lacked a bit of authority. Ramsay opened the letter and began to read it. Veronica asked what it said. When Ramsay finished reading it, he said. He immediately told Veronica to increase the training sessions going forward. It was a summons letter, he told her. The scene moved to Morris von Dodd, head of the Morris family, as a mysterious man in a dark hood bowed to him and said he was deeply honored to meet Count Morris. Morris called him Lord Licht and invited him out for a drink and a chat. Licht denied it, saying he did not drink much. Morris urged him not to hold back. At that moment, a beautiful woman approached, took his drink, and said she would drink it. Morris complimented her on drinking well and asked her name. Pamela introduced herself and said it was a pleasure to be close to him. Morris felt drunk and happy. Pamela moved closer, lay in his arms and comforted him. Licht asked Morris if he had decided. Morris said it was a great choice and that he needed a little more time to think. Licht expected that response since it had been the same for a while. Pamela urged him not to say that as they eagerly waited for his quick participation. When Morris tried to speak, she cut him off so he could not get a word in. She should clearly explain the benefits of joining them. Leaning close, she whispered that she would be his for the whole night and they would take their time. Morris became flustered and said they should talk all night, and Pamela told him she'd see him later as she and Licht left the room. After they left the room, Licht apologized to her for putting her through that. Pamela said it was a classic case of finding the right person for the job and asked him if he had seen his eyes, while he was already halfway there, and told him to leave persuading that foolish count to her. Licht acknowledged and said he would return to report that count. Morse of the Maddo Kingdom had switched allegiance to the Pandora Empire. Ramsay ran toward Darrell's house as the scene returned to him. Darrell told Ramsay in the letter that Duke Ignis, worried about his state, had decided to take down the traitor Morris, who was colluding with the Pandora Empire to overthrow it. He also wanted him to join the force as a commander, so their victories could be shared. Ramsay arrived at the mansion in Net Darrell. He said he had never imagined he would visit so soon. Ramsay said he had never expected to receive such a summons from him. Darrell laughed, asked whether he was surprised, and called him quite the trickster. Ramsay said it was an honor to see that news side of him. Ramsay realized it had been planned since that party and asked him when the deployment was scheduled. Darrell told him it was in Nidme and they would send 1,500 troops led by George, who had been introduced earlier. Ramsay figured he still had time to prepare properly, and when he asked about the other nobles, Darrell said Duke Ignis would attend along with Count Ronald and Viscount Dennis, adding that if it worked out, Marcus Lure would push the total over 10,000 soldiers. He said Ramsay would serve under his command, and Ramsay asked whether any rewards would be prepared. He assured him that the Count's lands to be abolished would be redistributed according to merit. Ramsay said getting a plot of land on the far western edge wouldn't help him much. Darrell said he understood and planned to repay him in other ways. However, that required significant effort. He ordered him to prepare 100 soldiers from the Bartlett territory, and Ramsay was shocked. Darrell repeated his order, telling Ramsay to prepare 100 soldiers, and then he would give him some authority. He remembered Veronica telling him she could mobilize about 50 troops right away. Doubling them in a month was impossible, but it wasn't a question of Kenya, and he knew Darrell wanted him to make it happen. Ramsay asked him to contact the Black Raven Guild as well. Darrell agreed but said that this time hiring mercenaries would come out of his own pocket, he said, and Ramsay agreed, thinking that war cost money. He never expected to feel it this way. Darrell said he would tell him where their base was. Writing directions on a piece of paper, he said he hoped he had negotiated well. Soon Ramsay reached the spot and saw a giant door. Places like these always attracted unsavory characters, he told himself, but he couldn't afford to be picky. Inside, he found Hawk wiping glasses. Hawk recognized Ramsay and welcomed him. Ramsay asked what he was doing, and Hawk replied that this was where he ran his bar. Hawk said he had something for him, told him to take a seat, and said he would get some milk. After finishing his drink, Ramsay said he wanted the Black Raven Guild's help again. Hawk asked what this time involved, and Ramsay showed him the letter. Reading it, Hawk realized the dupe had personally called for Ramsay. Ramsay told him he wanted 100 soldiers ready, and Hawk said it was quite. There were many, and hiring them all would be expensive. Ramsay said he knew and needed 70 of them from the Black Raven Guild. Hawk thought for a moment and said it was about 100 ruber per person. Ramsay worked it out as 7,000 ruber and asked when he should bring it. Hawk told him not to rush and that they should see if he could gather the numbers, and he said he would contact him in a few days so he could go to him. After he threw him out of the bar, Ramsay saw there was nothing more he could do. Deciding to head back, he realized he should contact Ashley. On returning, he realized he was short on cash and had nothing else. The Duke gave him a hefty 50,000 rubera, but after taking in Veronica and her soldiers, paying Hawk's mercenary fees and buying gear for Ashley's crew, only 300 rubera remained, and that was just for one person. After reviewing everything, his funds were less than half, so he had to reassess production in the territory. At that moment, someone knocked at the door, and it was Veronica. She said he locked himself in as soon as she returned, and asked what the status of the deployment was. Ramsay told her they were expected to send 100 troops to march toward Count Morse's territory near Nidme, and Veronica was shocked, saying that was a lot. As for a viscount, even 20 would have been enough. She asked how he planned to gather such a large number. Unable to handle it internally, he asked the Black Raven Guild to build it, and when Ramsay said that, something clicked in his head. He put his hand to his face, saying he had been played and that was why, then put his head down in disappointment, and Veronica asked him what he meant. Ramsay told her it seemed odd to pay 50,000 rubers up front, since they handed over that huge sum only to use him, block his escape and force him into the battlefield, so he had to rely on the mercenaries, knowing the Black Raven Guild would return part of the money to the Duke. Ramsay realized he'd been played from the start, he said. Stopping himself, he said there was no point in being sad, then told Veronica he had asked the Black Raven Guild to send 70 members, and she said she understood and that they should pick the 30 who would deploy. Ramsay told her that she and Danny were on standby. She was shocked and asked why. He said he needed both of them to defend the territory and would lead the troops. Veronica asked if something had happened to him, but Ramsay cut her off, said they had to prevent it, and told her to handle troop selection and training. She hesitated briefly, then agreed and told him to leave it to her. She left in anger, and Ramsay wondered how they should proceed this time. On the 17th of May, Hawk met Ramsay. Someone asked whether the Lord himself would lead the troops. Ramsay said they should definitely be on the winning side. Duke Ignis's anti-imperial force numbered about 10,000, while the Count's side had a staggering deficit of 1,000 troops. Hawks confirmed he agreed. They could not read the Empire's moves, and wondered if the Empire would send support to Count Morris, and if reinforcements were already converging. Ramsay felt uncertain about it. Darrell saw him, thanked him for coming, and said he appreciated it. Ramsay and Hawk knelt before him. Darrell said his Hendrik border army headed west 2 days ago. Ramsay said they would certainly crush the traitors, and stood up. He said the Bartlett troop would set off. The army marched ahead, and Hawk said they needed to meet General George first. If they went straight down this road, they'd reach the Count's territory. Hawk asked Ramsay whether he'd arranged a horse, and Ramsay said he couldn't afford one because of some clever scheming. Hawk laughed and asked what he meant. Ramsay put that aside for now and asked him what he thought was the smartest move. Ramsay said the safest and most profitable option for him was, but Hawk cut him off. Reports said it was looting nearby towns and villages. He expected the fight to turn into that kind of battle, so he didn't bring Danny and Veronica, since Danny was completely exhausted from the last battle, probably because of that kind of fighting. Hawk agreed with the tactic, but asked how they should approach it, and warned that if they kept attacking it, his reputation would suffer. Ramsay said he did not know all the nobles involved in this war, but if their pride was high, none would want to take that role. He suggested that if they said they had been forced into this and were only following orders, they might be able to change. Hawk agreed, saying it looked like a winning battle from his view, though the lords would rush to claim glory at the main camp, so he patted Ramsay on the back and told him to strike first and hard. Renzi argued that although they served the border duke, they should have the authority of an independent force, so they would have to force the general to agree. An idea suddenly came to him, so he asked Hawk whether he had a map. Hawk handed him the map and asked if he was plotting something. Ramsay confirmed it and said they should call off merging with the border duke's army. Hawk asked if this was really okay since it was a direct order from the duke. Ramsay said they'd been played for too long and it was time for some payback. On the front lines, the Hendrik's army general demanded to know what the Bartlett army was doing. Alongside the other viscounts, he waited there for them. One viscount said they perhaps should not have been summoned for that battle, and another said that since they were new to the frontier count's camp, they might not be able to muster soldiers. Another person said he had heard praise at the victory party earlier and asked whether they had become overconfident then. A messenger entered the tent to report that a message had arrived from Lord Ramsay. The general noticed that the messengers wore the Bartlett crest and could afford to outfit themselves when they fought. He asked the messenger where the lord himself was, and it looked like their meeting would be delayed. The messenger dropped to one knee, and he said he was there to file a report. His lord was being attacked right now by Count Morris's forces. The general was stunned to hear it, and a viscount grew frightened, saying they were supposed to win that battle. The general ordered everyone to calm down and sent the messenger to report the details immediately. The messenger told him their army had been moving from the frontier count's territory toward that place, but volunteers from Mode and Ryle villages ambushed them just as they neared the count's domain. He said his lord was fighting back and planned to seize those villages. The general said they would first move their troops forward and have them join as soon as they were done. The messenger said his lord planned to seize the northern village and capture the city of Fort. Taken aback, the general listened as the viscounts argued that Fort was the second largest city in the count's domain with more than 1,000 people, and that Ramsay's army could not have taken it. He asked for confirmation, and the messenger agreed. The general objected to the plan, saying his forces would struggle to carry it out. He ordered the messenger to tell his lord to capture only the 2 villages and regroup early. A messenger told him that his lord commanded 100 troops and had been given authority over an independent detachment from the frontier account, adding that, with the general's power defeating traitor Morris will be easy and asking for support from the rear. The viscounts were stunned to learn Ramsay had 100 soldiers while they had only about 20 to 50, and they could not understand how a minor noble had gathered so many. The general found the situation troublesome because he was not making claims that required the Lord's presence, and Lord Darrell had backed it. He said he understood. He told the messenger he expected great things. The messenger laughed. One of the viscounts asked him if he really intended to let them do as they pleased. The general replied that Farlett's army would not affect the battle's outcome and told them to depart as well. Join Forrest alongside Duke Ignes. He ordered everyone to prepare for the march. Next, the scene shifted to Pamela and Morris. Morris lay hidden under a blanket on his cot, and Pamela asked how much longer he intended to sit there since the sun was already high in the sky. Frightened, Morris warned that a large army was approaching them. Pamela reassured him it would be fine because the Count had many capable subordinates. She grabbed his face and said the Empire's reinforcements had arrived. Morris smiled as his mood lifted. Pamela told him not to worry and suggested they play a bit longer. They began working on several tasks. Outside the room, Lick and Percy stood guard. Percy said he did not want to serve under that man, even temporarily. Lick told him not to say that because it was part of the job. Percy agreed he had a point, and Litt said they should make an extra effort. At that moment, the old man instructed his ministers to strike immediately. They said it was pointless to hunker down with no hope of help, but the minister insisted that if they held on, imperial reinforcements would arrive soon and ordered his guard to strengthen the defenses. A man spotted Percy and Lick and asked whether the Empire would send reinforcements. Percy and Lick exchanged a look, and Lick told him they would, of course. Because the Empire was organizing its troops, it was safe to fortify, and the man grew excited. He ordered his guard to strengthen security at the business. Percy and Lick smiled at each other. At the Magic Royal Castle, Crown Prince M.O. of the Magic Kingdom insisted no reinforcements be sent, saying negotiations were the best course. His ministers asked him whether he would abandon Count Morris, who shared their ideals. Mel declared both Count Maurice and Duke Ignis vital to their people and asked that the people benefit from their bloodshed. It was the empire, he told himself, so they must not let it escalate into a conflict. The minister said they understood his intentions, but wanted to know how he planned to respond. He paused to consider it. They announced they would seize all of Count Maurice's lands and distribute them among Duke Ignis and others. Shocked, the ministers said this only empowered the anti-empire faction and demanded a show of resolve, warning it would set a bad example and risk the throne being usurped. So they urged using the chance to teach them a lesson with the empire's strength or even eradicate Ignis's faction. In fact, we'll see this. He reminded himself he had no interest in the throne and only wanted a happy life with his wife and children. More troublesome tensions had appeared, but he knew the meeting would probably make no decisions and would end with everyone watching out for themselves. Ramsay and Hawk were hiding in the bushes. One of them had to return home even though he did not want to, but he went back anyway. The scene shifted back to Ramsay and Hawk in the bushes, and the speaker kept saying thank you very much for joining us today over and over. He asked Hawk how big the village was, and Hawk said it was small and should not be a problem with so many people. He told Ramsay he'd played it well, making it seem the village attacked first so they could seize nearby villages as an excuse to plunder. Ramsay said joining the main force would bring little glory, and they didn't expect much from it, so it was far more reliable to move freely and collect money directly. He said they should stick to the plan, and Hawk told him to count on Hawk. Villagers began running like hawks. He ordered the soldiers to strip the village of its supplies and told the villagers to gather in one place and not to resist, promising they would all be free. Ramsay realized he had to maneuver carefully to prevent Bartlett from getting a bad reputation. They planned to first flank the village with the Black Karen gang and Bartlett's force, seize hostages to compel the villagers to surrender. Meanwhile, the Black Heron gang seized the village's treasures and supplies, kept only the food needed for the march, sent the rest to Bartlett's territory, assigned 4 soldiers to each cart, and sent back those unaccustomed to battle. With the villagers gathered in the center, the final touch was Ramsay's speech. Bowing his head, he apologized, leaving the villagers shocked. He told them he did not want to use such rough tactics, could not defy Baron Hendrik's order, and did not want to harm any of them. He told them to go to Count Maurice because other villages were unsafe and apologized again. The villagers wondered if the Baron had organized it and agreed to go to Count Maurice. Seeing this, Hawks called the Ramsay an actor. After they took Rose Village, he asked Ramsay what was next and whether he was really planning to go to Fort. Ramsay considered it, and Hawk said he was in charge of tactics and would not interfere with Ramsay's strategy. Ramsay thanked him and said they should move on. May 21st had arrived. In western Madoc, on Count Maurice's land, the planned 10,000-strong anti-imperial force had gathered. Prince Agnes led the army from the front. Addressing his viscounts and counts, he thanked them for gathering and expressed his gratitude. He said they must have heard the news that Count Maurice had sided with the Empire, and despite several chances to explain, Maurice ignored them and began building up his forces, so they could not let it continue. They agreed they must unite the nation, beset by internal strife and external threats. Without delay, they would take down Count Maurice here and now. Everyone there agreed. A man named Rossi stepped forward and said they should go straight to the military council. He told them the enemy had about 2,000 troops and was fortifying its position. Maurice likely expected reinforcements from the Empire and said they had to crush them before that help arrived, and one of the counts asked whether they should launch an all-out attack immediately. Rossi warned him it would cost them dearly with the Empire lurking nearby, so he wanted to limit their losses. Another count asked what they should do. Rossi was about to speak, but he was interrupted when a soldier told them a messenger wanted to speak with General George. George hesitated to let the messenger into such an important meeting, but Rossi said it was fine because it might be urgent. When the messenger arrived, George recognized him as Bartlett's messenger and asked what he wanted. The messenger said he had Lord Ramsay's report and plan. They had attacked Mode and Rose Village, but the villagers had escaped to Morizia Castle instead. Shocked, Jurg realized chaos was normal in battle and that he had let them get away, and he asked the messenger why they hadn't captured the villagers and sending villagers to Morris Castle only strengthened the enemy, he said. The messenger told him they had not captured them because they were running low on supplies. George said they should simply have been eliminated and asked why he had allowed them to go to Morris's side, and the messenger replied that his lord believed it would be more advantageous to take the castle. George felt confused, and Rossi asked the messenger if his lord had really said that. The messenger confirmed it, saying they planned to continue taking nearby villages and send the villagers to the castle. Rosi told the messenger to go away, but before he left, he asked what his lord's name was. He said his lord's name was Ramsay Bartlett, the Viscount serving under Baron von Hendrik's. Agnes praised the messenger for doing well and told him to leave. Rosi considered why he had not killed the villagers or sent them to the enemy's castle, since they might use that against him. That confirmed they were planning a siege. Rosi told the crowd the best strategy was to surround Count Morris' castle and lay siege. The news shocked everyone, and one of the counts said he could not agree to this because they were true nobles, not low-born commoners. With their tradition and prestige, a shameful battle like that would tarnish their dignity. Hearing that, Rosi thought about the responsibilities of the nobility. They still had to govern the territory. He knew they needed to prioritize prestige over practicality. Ignis asked Rosi for an alternative. Rosi urged the crowd to push forward before the imperial army arrived. He told them that once things were settled, they should hurry and get ready to move west. Seeing Rosi deep in thought, Ignis asked him what was wrong. If something was on his mind, Rosi said this counted. Ramsay Bartlett's view of the battlefield. The groundwork was intriguing. The scene cut to Hawk and Ramsay, and Hawk asked Ramsay what they should do next. They had already captured most of the villages, and only Fort remained nearby. Ramsay agreed, saying they were short on troops to transport the supplies they had seized. Ramsay suggested they pretend to surround Ford while they waited. Hawk asked him whether they could do that. With so many people, it was impossible to surround them. A soldier approached Ramsay. A writer said they still had some distance to go, but a small cavalry unit was approaching, and its affiliation was unknown, and this shocked Ramsay and Hawk. Hawk told his guards to gather and get ready to intercept. Ramsay wondered if the small unit was there to scout or to deliver a message. When the unit arrived, Hawk stopped them and asked who their commanding officer was. Even the men from the units said they were messengers from General George, Baron Hendrik's representative, and asked whether they were the army of Ramsay Bartlett. Ramsay confirmed his identity. The messenger was surprised to see him and apologized for addressing him from horseback. He was told the general had called a meeting, so he needed to hurry and regroup at the main camp. After telling him the main camp was southwest of there, they left, and Ramsay asked Hawk what he thought. He said that as soon as they acknowledged the independent cavalry, they called a meeting, and though he didn't understand it, he knew they had no choice but to go. He told his soldiers the break was over, and they were moving out. Ramsay wondered whether the battle situation had changed. After a while he reached the main camp, where Hawk saw so many soldiers and people, and said the scale was impressive, and a guard came, asked if Lord Bartlett was there, then ran off. Ramsay confirmed this by giving his name, and noticed the guard's polished appearance, wondering if the guard served a higher noble. The guard was surprised to see Ramsay, and told him that Duke Agnes requested his presence, and asked him to follow. Ramsay was surprised to hear that the Duke was there, and told him. Hawk decided to leave the army to him. Surprised by the Duke's arrival, Hawk told Ramsay to go ahead. After a while, they reached a tent where a guard announced himself, apologized for the intrusion, said he had brought Lord Bartlett, and told Ramsay to go inside. Just by seeing the Duke present, Ramsay knelt, introduced himself, and said he had hurried over after hearing he was needed. Ignis told him to relax because there was no need to be so stiff. He said he wasn't the one with the business, but Rosi was, introducing himself as an aide to the Duke. He told Ramsay he had several questions and asked him to answer, since Ignis was a kind man who would not get angry over small things. At first he asked why his army had attacked the villages. Ramsay said they had simply acted to weaken the enemy. Rosi agreed that destroying the villagers and reducing production was a tactic, but she asked why he had allowed the villagers to escape, and Ramsay replied that despite their conflicts, they were all subjects of the same kingdom, and with the uneven troop numbers the victory was obvious, so killing them would be cruel. Rosi said he should have enslaved them because it would have filled his coffers and achieved 2 goals, and Ramsay replied that his army lacked the resources to bring back slaves, so it was a hard decision, and they decided it was better to spare their lives. Rosi said they should leave it at that because unfortunately it had not gone as he predicted and had turned into a siege. Ramsay asked what he meant, and Rosi called him disingenuous, saying he had sent villagers to Marissa Castle to speed up food consumption because he expected Duke Morris to go into the sea. Rosi smiled and said what was done, and that he wanted to hear suggestions for tomorrow's siege, while Ramsay asked what else they could do and said that with this troop difference they should attack aggressively. Rosi said it would only increase their damage, and he wanted to win while keeping their losses to a minimum. Ramsay remembered saying it, but they had not received any military training. Ramsay said it was only one example. Then he offered a suggestion. After talking for a while he left, and Ignis asked Rossi what he thought of the current strategy. Rossi said there was room for improvement, but overall the direction seemed good. For a rural lord, Ramsay was quite capable, and he expected Baron Hendrik to have some fine pieces. Ignis said being shown new toys wasn't fun, and perhaps he should leave his mark on them too. On May 23, Morris was very stressed. He grabbed Penilla and demanded to know where the reinforcements were and why they hadn't arrived. She told him she'd check on it and left the room, frustrated. Entering the room, she saw Percy and told her she did a good job. Pamela asked where Licht was, and the woman said they had roped him into helping the soldiers. Pamela sat down and asked her if it was time to leave. Percy said she and Licht had just been talking about sneaking out that night. Pamela was surprised and said she had heard nothing about it. Percy said that was because she hadn't told her. He told her to do her best. Angry, Pam Lagarde said they should gather the jewels they had made the Count pay for. At that moment, Lit entered the room looking troubled. Pamela said she was relieved he was safe. Percy asked him what was wrong. He said that something fell to him. Even as dusk fell, he said the Ironous Forest showed no sign of retreat, and they kept attacking the gates without arrows. Pamela said it would be faster to break down the gates, and because there were so many, they should concentrate on the castle gates. Lit agreed, saying the difference in numbers was overwhelming, yet the gates still held. Their force was too small, and it seemed they did not intend to take the castle at all. Percy said they must have been wary of the Empire's reinforcements, thinking the Empire would come while they were holed up there, and Licht asked if that was really the case. Pamela said she could not care less about their plans, and asked Licht how they would get out of there. Lit said they were surrounded by enemies, and the battle was raging, so they had no choice but to blend in with the townspeople and escape. Fortunately, many villagers had strangely taken refuge in that castle. Percy said they had no other choice, and Pamela said she would pack up quickly and told him to wait for her. Licht wondered what Duke's army was up to, and realized the kingdom had crafty strategists who had worn them down without causing more damage. On May 24, Lord Douglas and Lord Dobie were discussing the battle. Some of them said the anti-Empire force attacked day and night, and although they had split their troops, they could not even rest, probably because they were running out of arrows too fast and the lack of proper arrows was killing them. He asked his soldiers if they'd found Licht and Percy yet, and they said they had not. Dobie told him it was enough, saying the Empire had cornered them from the start. There was never any intention of sending reinforcements. They were only pawns used to drain the kingdom's strength. They had to think about the future from then on because no reinforcements would come, so surrender might be an option. He asked Douglas for his view, and Douglas replied that surrender would mean execution, so they would fight to the bitter end like warriors. Dobie said they could do it, but they were dragging townsfolk and soldiers into it too. Douglas warned that if it continued, the townsfolk would become sleeves, so they should fight for better peace terms. At that moment, a soldier told Douglas the enemy was intensifying its attack, so Douglas volunteered to take command on the front lines and left. Dobie reminded himself that, as a general, they could not afford to misjudge when to withdraw. He entered the room where Morris sat, wrapped in a blanket and too scared to come out. Dobie urged them to surrender, saying no reinforcements were coming from the Empire and they had no chance of winning. Morris refused and asked where Pamela was. Dobie grabbed Morris and slapped him. I told him to wake up because we were in the middle of the war. Morris learned that Pamela was gone and that the Empire had used them, and he sat there realizing what had happened, feeling disappointed and betrayed. The scene moved to Ignis and Rossi, and Ignis asked about the situation. Rossi said it had only been 2 days, but the weariness was showing, so in 2 or 3 more days they should be able to take the castle easily, and Ignis said that meant Ramsay's plan had worked. A flashback showed Rossi and Ramsay's conversation, in which Ramsay suggested moving the army in 3 shifts. He had explained they could split the army into 3, rotate the troops to minimize losses, and keep collecting taxes around the clock. Worse, the attackers did not use arrows, and in a siege it was hard to resupply, so their arrows would run out in a few days. Ramsay suggested easing their attacks for the first 2 days so they could reduce losses on both sides while wearing down the enemy. Returning to the present, Rossi said they had to use arrows to put pressure on the enemies at the wall, but arrows without tops had been effective. If they kept it up for 2 or 3 more days, they should be careful not to let the soldiers waver. Just then, a guard entered the tent and hurried to report that the enemy seemed ready to surrender. This shocked Agnes, and after a while while Idnis and the other lords were seated, Count Maurice von Dodd and his companions arrived bound and restrained. Ignis asked them what had caused the sudden change of heart. Maurice said he no longer saw any chance of victory and could not bear to harm the people needlessly, adding that if saving his head was the cost, it was a small price to pay. They exchanged a look. Agnes gave a look. He said he would say nothing more, and because of that decision, he promised the soldiers and townspeople would be safe and would not be made slaves. Maurice said he had no regrets and told the man to behead him. Agnes signaled his soldier, who unsheathed his sword, and he beheaded Maurice in a single swift motion, killing him. Then he covered himself with a cloak. Anis then asked Douglas and Dobie about the events in the Count's territory. Dobie said he wouldn't make excuses. It was all their fault, but they were only puppets dancing to the Empire's tune. Dobie told him the whole story. At first, they had urged Lord Maurice to marry and had promised to send a capable daughter. He had been somewhat interested, but his bride never arrived. They gave plausible reasons about finding a suitable bride for the Count's house, though there had never been any real plan. 2 imperial generals were sent as protectors, but trusting promises of full support, they turned their bows on the prince. Those generals had disappeared before the battle began, and no bodies were found. He said they had likely fled, expecting the castle to fall. Realizing they had fallen into the Empire's trap, and with no reinforcements in sight, they had no choice but to surrender. He told him Lord Maurice deeply regretted it, and that he had foolishly trusted the Empire's sweet words, which caused unnecessary harm to his soldiers and citizens. Faced with no choice, he had to offer his head and plead for mercy on behalf of the citizens. Ramsay heard this and thought that, despite their infiltration, the generals had withdrawn too easily, and he wondered what the Empire's aim was in sowing chaos across the kingdom. They will be asked to advise on the strategy and whether the rumor about Genius Rossi was true, and Rossi asked what the strategy was. Dobie told her he had been talking about the siege, that the day and night attacks had worn him down, and that the typeless arrows had annoyed him. Rossi understood him and pointed at Ramsay, who was taken aback. They all talked among themselves, noting he was very young and had offered a clever idea, and Renzi wondered why she had singled him out. Rossi clapped her hands to quiet the room and told everyone to move on to the next matter. Ignis said he would soon announce the fate of Lord Dobie and Lord Douglas and ordered his guards to take them away. After that, he told the crowd he would now move on to the rewards and honors, announcing the first honor of the. When the campaign reached General George, the crowd applauded, and Ramsay felt this part was staged. In the end, no one had distinguished themselves in the operation, and even if they seized Councilland, the money and lives lost on the march would not be recovered, with rewards likely going to the more powerful nobles. After a while, Agnes said he had finished giving the rewards and honors and told everyone they had done well. When people began to leave, Rossi called Ramsay. She thanked him for his hard work this time, and Ramsay said he appreciated her generous words. Rossi said Anis had promised he would also get a reward and told him to follow her, and Ramsay, surprised, followed her to meet Anis. Ignis thanked him for the strategy, saying it was why they had won so easily. Ramsay said he was flattered by his words. Agnes said he meant to reward him, but no land near Bartlett was available, so he gave him a bag of gold instead. Ramsay felt disappointed, but accepted it. He realized that to the north lay the Hendrik March, where they could claim no land. The eastern royal domain could only be ruled by the king, and to the west lay the Borden Barani, so they could not interfere with the southern dominion either. They needed crops and people to grow them to enrich the land, and he knew he could not expand their territory further. Agnes read his expression and knew what Ramsay wanted. He was told that if he aimed higher, there might be a way. Ramsay was shocked to see that Agnes had read his expression. Ignis told him that if he wanted land, he had to seize it. He should devour the Borden Baron. Surprised, he laughed. He said he was asking for the impossible because the strength gap was too large. Count Gardel stood behind the board and the Baron ground, and his weak army had no chance. Ignis asked whether he still carried the wounds Lord Darrell had inflicted. Rather than anything else, he would lend him aid. Ramsay felt frightened and said he needed time to think. He returned to the hawk that had seen. I saw a bag of gold in his hand and asked him to share some of the spoils with them. Ramsay ignored him and walked ahead. He thought Ignis was willing to help, but they weren't even neighbors, so they couldn't be of much help, and he knew the outcome of the Bartlett versus Borden and Gardel coalition was clear as day. To keep the townspeople's happiness unthreatened, he could not leave any embers of conflict. He had expected to enjoy the slow life while developing the land, but it wasn't going smoothly. When he returned to his territory, he saw goats roaming around. Veronica greeted him. He said things had become lively there, and she replied that her master had sent plenty of livestock and supplies from the expeditions. Ramsay told her that goats were omnivorous and thrived in barren lands, so they were perfect livestock for them. He asked Eric to set up the chicken and goat pen stock. Eric said he was already working on it, and the other man tried to give more ideas. Danny cut him off, apologized for putting him on the spot right after his return, and told him to head to the reception. He was in the room because a visitor had arrived. Ramsay was surprised and went to the reception room, where a well-dressed man met him and led him inside. Told Ramsay he had finally made it. Ramsay looked confused when the man said he had been waiting a long time. Ramsay said he did not think they had an appointment and asked who the man was. He apologized for his oversight. He introduced himself as Hendry, the legitimate son of Baron de Dominic. Hearing this, Ramsay realized Baron Dominic ruled the territory just south of Bartlett. He wondered why he had come at that moment and asked what business Lord Henry had with him. Henry said that now they were neighbors, he thought he'd drop by to say hello. Hearing that Ramsay was out fighting Lord Hendrik, he timed his visit to meet him on his return and said the sofa and table were a gift, so Ramsay could feel free to use them. Taking a sip from his glass, he found the wine intriguing and asked if it was called cast. Ramsay was angry because Danny had served Henry Cass. Sitting down, he said hearing Henry say it made the effort he'd put in worthwhile. Henry told him he really liked it and asked if Ramsay would teach him how to make it. After asking others who said Ramsay was the only one who knew, Ramsay told him he could not. Since it was an important resource, he refused to share his money-making recipe and wondered if Henry could really be that naive. Henry told him to sell it to him and asked how much it cost. Ramsay told him a cask would cost 3,000 rubella. Ramsay had raised the price and thought it was a bit steep. Henry immediately said he would take 10 barrels. Ramsay was surprised and said he would prepare it and send it, and Henry said that when the time came he should come visit. Ramsay asked if he meant at home and thought to himself he was closing the distance like a school kid, and Henry said that was for the date and 4 days from then would be fine. He left saying he would wait for him. Danny called Henry a whirlwind, and Ramsay said he just wanted a break. Run on June 3. Roger, Ramsay and Danny went south of Bartlett's territory, with Roger pushing the cart and tired, asking whether they were there yet. Ramsay said it was about time and that he was visiting the city for the first time. Roger asked Danny to switch, but Danny said they had just changed shifts. Roger then asked for a short break. During a break, Ramsay asked what they would do after the delivery. One said they'd go straight back to the village, but Danny denied that, said they were heading to the Dominican territory, then forgot the capital's name. Roger reminded him it was called Dominion Dordom, and Danny said he was thinking of checking it out. Both he and Roger then asked Ramsay for pocket money. Convinced it was a reward for carrying the goods, Ramsay told him he would give it to them after they finished the delivery. Excited, they hurried to the cart. Roger's tiredness gone, so he told Danny to leave the cart to him, and Ramsay called them a greedy bunch. After a while, he reached Dordom and saw a large concrete building. A long line stretched to the entrance and a guard inspected people, so he assumed many merchants were coming and going, and after a while it was their turn. Ramsay told the guard he was from Bartlett territory and had arrived on behalf of Lord Henry of House Dominic. Guard signaled another guard, apologized to Ramsay for the wait, and asked him to hold on for a moment. Ramsay was surprised by the sudden change and expected the spoiled Henry to be treated more leniently, just as Henry arrived apologizing for about the wait and whether he had waited too long. Ramsay told him not to worry, and Henry said they should head to his place right away, and Ramsay found him as pushy as ever. Soon they reached his mansion near the city. Ramsay saw 2 people waiting outside the gate, and he asked Hendry who they were and was told they were his father and mother. Ramsay quickly bowed and apologized for his behavior. Henry's father said he did not need to be formal. It had been ages since Henry had brought a friend over, so he invited him in, resting a hand on his shoulder, while his mom said she had some delicious treats ready. When Ramsay asked about the goods, Henry said his family would handle the rest. One of the workers bought the goods and gave the money to Danny and Roger. Ramsay realized it was getting awkward because he couldn't now say they weren't friends, and he needed to avoid upsetting the neighboring lords. Andrew's father said his name was Elma de Dominic. Ramsay bowed, introduced himself, and Elma told him to loosen up, relax, and enjoy himself. Ilma cried that Henry finally had a friend, and Henry's mother brought a plate of food, telling him to share it with his friend and to take some pocket money if he went out, and Henry was embarrassed and told them to stop. He pushed Ramsay and said they should go. Ramsay thought it seemed like a pretty normal family. Henry led him into his room and told him to hang his coat anywhere. Laughing, Henry said he had just set aside what he did not want, and Ramsay praised his room, saying it had top-notch furniture. Henry said they were a family who made their fortune in trade, and that his father had bought his title from a struggling royal family. Because of that, the traditional aristocrats saw them as enemies. Seeing his parents so happy, Ramsay assumed they must have regretted his lack of friends and realized Henry was not entirely blameless either. Henry told him to handle things, at least in front of the family. Ramsay was surprised and thought that among nobles family interests always came first, and while nodding was easy, he did not want to go along with it. He asked Henry to show him around the city, and Henry asked if he meant Borderland. Ramsay agreed, saying it was a bustling trade city worth checking out in the future, and he would decide whether to befriend him as they interacted. Henry was glad to hear it and said no one knew the city better than he did, so he would show him everything. Outside, they visited different shops and markets, and a shop owner stopped Henry. When someone offered Henry some fine wine and asked if he wanted a glass, he declined, said he was busy today, and promised to come by tomorrow, and Ramsay saw that the townsfolk really liked him. Henry spotted a fried bread stall and asked the women there to make 2 fresh ones. Ramsay watched and realized it would be hard for him to fit in with their relaxed attitude. They ate the fried buns. Henry asked if there was a town like this in Ramsay's territory. Ramsay said they usually went to Hendo's to trade. Henry noticed something and told Ramsay he didn't need to be so formal anymore, and no one would scold him for it. Ramsay agreed, and Henry said Hendo was a big city, but they were not losing out on trade. Ramsay laughed and nodded his agreement. At that moment, a large castle caught his eye, and Henry asked him what was wrong. Ramsay asked whether this church was affiliated with the minor church. Henry said the city had many merchants from the empire, and even a place set aside for their prayers. Ramsay clenches his fist in anxiety and asks if that means the Dominic family supports the empire. He realized that if that were the case, the Bartlett family would become enemies of Duke Ignace and could be attacked from the west by Baron Borden and from the south by Count Dominic. Henry said there was not really any more. He explained they stayed neutral, siding with no one and showing no contempt. They were a trading family, so anyone who paid was a customer. He left. The captain said the unpopular newcomer, like them, received no offers from either side. Ramsay told him he did not need to be so self-deprecating. Then Henry asked if he had found what he wanted. Ramsay spotted a flower that stood out to him. Henry said the flower had just arrived from the empire and was small but beautiful. Ramsay recognized it and knew it was different. He remembered it from his grandmother's garden in his past life, and he knew it was a potato flower. He aggressively told the florist there that he would take that flower, and she told him it would be 5 rubarbara. On hearing this, Ramsay realized they had not recognized it as food. Henry asked if he liked flowers, and Ramsay decided it was best to stay quiet for now, telling Henry that picking flowers was a gentleman's pastime. Henry gave him a puzzled look, grabbed him, and said he'd take him somewhere really nice. Henry led him into a mysterious alley, and Ramsay asked what kind of shop it was and whether it was safe to be in an alley like this, and Henry told him not to worry because he was a regular. They reached the shop door, where a guard stood and welcomed Henry, who introduced Ramsay. Ramsay told the man it was nice to meet him and asked what kind of place it was. The man introduced himself as Morris and said this was a slave shop he owned. Entering the shop together, Ramsay felt uneasy because he'd heard rumors about it, and it was his first time inside. When asked what he usually did here, Henry said he was looking for someone to play with today and that they'd be hired at his house afterward and paid. Henry left smiling, and Morris told Ramsay to let him know if Ramsay liked someone. Ramsay remembered Veronica saying they needed sleeves and told himself he would not let feelings from his past life about buying sleeves hold him back. He noticed sleeves were made for all ages and genders and came at different prices. Noticing a door, he asked Morris what was behind it. Morris asked whether he was interested and wanted to take a look. He agreed, and they walked into a vast hall. Morris explained that former nobles and priests, or their sons and daughters, gathered here, basically upper-class people. He said they were proud and hard to handle, and few buyers wanted them, but they were valuable and sold for a high price. Ramsay saw this and realized that people like him, even higher nobles, were just sleeves here. A boy in chains waited as the dungeon meeting was about to start, and a fate began to unfold.